Yeah, it's picking up mine. It's just not picking up yours for some reason. This is the worst. Yeah, I moved it for you. Um, this is unfortunate. Keep talking for me so I can see if it's.
4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13,
All
14.
right.
I can't even pay attention.
It shows that we can hear you now, but I don't know.
Can you guys hear me now? Or, can you hear me now? Guys, everybody in the chat, what's going on? Hello? Is it fixed? I feel like an asshole right now.
Well, you should.
Can you hear me? Can you
Yeah, I
hear
can hear
me?
you.
They say they got me. They can hear me, dude. You fixed it, but I still can't see your screen, so what do you do now, soldier?
I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine. What do you even need? You shouldn't need to see my screen today. You have the notes from last week, so you're just using
Oh,
those.
oh yeah,
Yeah, pull
sure.
those up, would you?
Yeah. Let me see if I can find them in my filing cabinets.
Man, at least
No,
we.
I don't have the notes. You're just gonna have to, if we're doing visual gags, you're gonna have to, because I can't see you, so that makes.
Yeah, that's true. Well, that's a shame. Maybe actually, here's what I can do for you. You should be able to see me.
Oh
So
yeah,
if I'm
yeah,
doing a thing,
yeah. We'll just do it like that. Might as well.
wow, we have just been like on a roll for shit luck.
Yeah, dude. We're just like, no, yeah, showing up with our fucking, you know, I don't even know what to say.
Awful,
I,
awful.
I don't even know what to say right now. At least well, let's not jinx anything. Let's just not jinx anything. So how do we get this started now that we've already started? We didn't even do our did you do our thing, our opening thing?
The
Remember our new opening?
duologue? Yeah, I did. I did while you were talking, actually.
Oh,
Um,
okay, good.
yeah, you
Good,
were.
good.
Luckily, they couldn't hear you because as you were reading your favorite excerpts from Mein Kampf, right?
Oh. No, I was doing the was for
No,
like
you were actually talking about what do you call him? Nacho.
oh not
Nacho.
that was Nacho Libre. Great
The
movie.
I do want to point out once since I called you out about the Mein Kampf bit, how in the chat the other day you said we were talking about, or in the Discord we said something about um, that whole situation with the racism in the Discord chat,
Oh yeah.
and I said, and then V got involved, and he just like really like chastised this poor guy, and I'm over here like egging him on and shit, and V's the one who had to like come in and really just rip this dude a new asshole. And your response was something to the effect of like, I'd prefer not to be made the bad guy for speaking out against hate. that was very
Yeah.
funny to me, and I felt a little bad because I thought like maybe you thought I was actually giving you shit about it, but I was like, you know what, I'm gonna let him think that. I'm gonna whatever he thinks about this situation, I'm gonna let him think that.
It's funny to me because every time you do that when you're contrarian to me, there for a split moment I go, oh, I can't believe you would say that. And then like as I'm typing whatever my response is to you, I'm realizing, well, he's joking. He's joking. And then I go, fuck it, I'll just finish. I might as well finish the whole text what I was arguing with you about or yelling at you or laying into you, going, I'm not like that. How dare you? How dare you
How
say that about
dare you?
me? Yeah. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah,
Oh,
interesting week though. Interesting week. What do we got for the duo? Like, are we jumping in? We're running late, so
No, we're not really running that late. What did you do this week?
Well, I had kind of frustrating this week. I was really angry because I've been planning this trip to Taiwan to visit Sharon in July for her birthday, and she's born on July 4th, which America, fucking America, fucking America. And so
America.
yeah, so I've been planning this trip, and so the other day, I've been getting this windfall of money, like the Biden checks or the stimulus check, and then the unemployment stuff is just stacking up, and I'm going, well, plus my disability, so I'm just pulling in whatever, and I'm sitting on all this money, like blowing it on DoorDash and whatever, right? And so I go, well, I might as well look and see if, but maybe I can find a cheap ticket right now to go out to Taiwan for July. Like if you get it early, you do the bundle, you get the hotel and the flight together, you book them together, you get a better deal. And so I was like, I'll see what I can do with that. And so I check it all out, fly out July 1st, this and that. And all these things come up like literal red flags. And it's all travel restrictions. If you want to fly out of the country right now, you have to go through 14 days, like into Taiwan. You get there, you have to wait 14 days in quarantine, which is how long I was planning to stay, right? So I would have to stay an extra 14 days in quarantine before I could even visit Sharon. And then coming back, I'd have to stay wherever in the US at a quarantine site for 10 days. So already I'm going, what is this? Like, what is this? And it's so, like, it made me so mad because I had to tell Sharon, like, look, like, it's smarter. It's smarter if we just wait till these travel restrictions are over. And of course, she's like, that's what I told you. I told you that already, which she did. She was like, I don't know if that's a good idea. And I was like, but I want to see you. And of course, like we want to see each other, but it's not feasible, right? Like it's not smart. It's not wise. It'd be a waste of money. And so, which her and I, like, we came to this agreement that, like, it's, yeah, of course, like we're good. Like we know we're together. We know we're in a relationship. So let's not rush it. Let's just be patient. But then I started getting angry about like the system, right? Like the fucking system, dude, going like, well, goddamn this fucking administration. Like, when is this shit going to end? Like, how long are we still going to be in fucking quarantine? How long are we still going to have to wear fucking masks? Like, I'm sick of this shit. And I know, like, you don't wear a mask, mister. I'll fucking puff my chest at anyone. And I trick myself into doing it because I like to look like a ninja or whatever. And I love having my mask, like being able to just go like this and people go, oh, he's got a mask, plus, it looks way cooler. But I started getting mad. I was like, fuck this shit, dude. Like okay, when Biden got elected, I was like, all right, well, it's not going to really affect me that much, so I'm not going to be like a liberal and go screaming at the sky and whatever. I'll just take it and go, well, I guess the next 4 years are going to suck. But now I'm going, man, these 4 years are really going to fucking suck because it's affecting me. I can't go visit Sharon, which I wanted to do. Like I wanted to do that this year, and now it's like, well, what do I do now? I just sit here with my thumb up my ass in my fucking quarantine apartment, right? Where I'm not even sick, at all, but I can't do shit because the fucking communist goddamn government has got his thumb on us, just going, no, you do what we say. You can't travel when we travel, and you better fart when we say fart, or you get what I'm going. Can you feel my rage right now about this? Like why I'm upset, like now it's affecting me. Are you even listening?
I feel like I'm picking up some of your emotion here, and I understand. Like we were talking the other day, like you don't have to actually contribute at all to a conversation in order for like people to like you. All you have to do is ask questions, and they don't even have to be like real meaningful questions. Like, so why does that make you mad? Because clearly you're upset. Why does that make you mad? What is it about that makes you so passionate? And then they'll like go on another tirade, and then you'd be like, well, so you're telling me this, and I'm wondering, like what do you intend to do with this information? Like that's all you have to do is you just have to keep asking questions, and people will just talk. At the end of it, you've said nothing. You've contributed nothing to the conversation, but they'll like you more because they sat there and they just talked about themselves for an hour and somebody listened to them, and that's all people really want. But no, I get it. I feel you. I was thinking the same exact thing the other day. I actually, here's something funny. I recently, so as I'm going through seminary, right, I'm trying to be a better Christian, right? And I think that's the point. That's the whole reason I decided to go to seminary in the first place. it was part of my spiritual development. And so as I'm doing some of these Bible studies, uh, I try to like get something from them, right, and try to make meaningful change in my life. And one of them the other day, I guess it was about do these things without complaining, right? Do what you're supposed to do and do it without bitching is essentially what Paul was saying to the Philippians. And part of this I call it indoctrinated Bible study because that's what it's doing, is it's trying to indoctrinate you. But it's inductive Bible study. You have to do an application and a proclamation at the end. So it's basically like a little mini sermon that you have to do at the end of each one, based on the information within the text that was given. And for the application, I realized I do a lot of bitching. I do a lot of complaining. And I thought,
Yeah.
what am I really getting out of not wearing a mask? I mean, yeah, it's bragging rights. I get to be like, you fucking people, you're scared of this virus or whatever.
Yeah,
It's bragging rights. But then there are some situations where you kind of have to wear a mask. And my rule has always been, in a medical situation, I will always wear a mask, like the dentist, the hospital, the vet, that sort of thing. Just because it makes sense. But for like stores, some stores will still make you wear them. Most stores don't. They'll either not ask you about them, or they'll they might bring it up and you just say, well, I have a medical condition, I have a respiratory condition, and they'll drop it right then and there. And I realized that there are some stores that just won't. They'll just make you wear a mask. And I would do a lot of huffing and puffing, and I would just end up leaving. I'm like, you know what, this is your right to not let me come in here. That's fine. But then I thought, I do, like I said, I do a lot of bitching and complaining. And what purpose does that serve, really? So I've gotten to the point where, what the hell? Costco is one of the stores that you just can't go in without a mask now. Right. So I started, I'll wear a mask in Costco. I don't have a problem with that now. But then there are like the stores that really burned me in the beginning of the pandemic. Those are the ones that I just won't return to, like a Farm and Fleet, I think, is one of them, and or Menards. It's Menards. So I won't go back to that store. But yeah, I've kind of like done what you did, where you tricked yourself into thinking like, oh well, I can look cool wearing this mask or whatever. Now I'm just like, all right, Paul, I get it. Like, I'll stop bitching about the fucking mask nonsense or whatever. And I actually had an experience the other day at the library where I've always been asked to wear a mask in the library, and I've always told them no, and they've respected that. But this last time, and it always pisses me off too, right? When people are like, they come up to you, do you have a mask, sir? Like, and they say it angrily. That rubs me the wrong way and makes me not want to wear one even more. But the other day, someone, for the first time in a year, I've had an experience with somebody asking me if I had a mask, where I walked away thinking, what a sweet woman. What a nice way to bring this to my attention, right? She came up to me and she said, very timidly, right? She came up to me and almost in like a position of servitude, as much as you can from like a standing position in public. She's like, sir, did you have a mask? And I said, no, I actually, and she like went to continue talking because she heard me say no. She's like, would you care for one? Can I offer you one? And I said, no, I actually have a respiratory condition. And she says, I am sorry to intrude. I apologize. I truly do. And she walked away, and that was that. And I was like, that should be how like every business handles the mask thing. Not, sir, where's your fucking mask? Like, this is a pandemic. You're killing people. Like, this lady, she was just like, hey, listen, I'm sorry.
It's very that's relevant. I'm reading this book by Nikolai Machiavelli, called the Prince, and it's all about manipulation. It's about how to get your subjects to do what you want, right? And a lot of it is like telling people what they want to hear, like getting them to like you, and my dad, he always says, it's the approach. It's all how you approach the person. Like, you have to know, like, you got to learn like body language, and like, are they already guarded? Like, they see you about to approach them, they're already going, oh no. It's like a car salesman, right? Like, they're about to go approach the customer. How do you do it without them already going with that pre-notion of a car salesman being sleazy? They're always going, here comes the vulture, right? but you have to. And like when I used to sell cars, man, I was like this dumb kid that was just like, I'm friends with everybody. I don't know. And that's why I did so good at it, because I didn't look at it as like, I've got to sell this car. I looked at it as like, I got to make friends with these people. I got to like figure out how I can step into their world and be like, we're homies, man. And people will buy a car from a friend way before they'll buy one from a car salesman. And so it's interesting. Like that paints a really interesting picture of how, they want us to wear these masks, and yeah, we know it's dumb. It's stupid. Obviously, like it's really dumb that it still exists and that even people still are scared of this disease. And it's like, okay, come on, really, it wasn't that big of a deal to begin with, and you're still blowing it out of proportion. And yet there are still methods that you can get people to not necessarily bow to the mob, but at least conform. Like that's how I view it. Like I'm going, I hate it. And it's one of those contradictory things, right? Like I hate it that I've conformed by wearing a mask, but at the same time, I'm going, well, I'm doing it with style. I got my own mask. I'm not going to wear your dumbass surgical mask because it looks fucking stupid. And I hate that thing over your nose. I fucking hate that. The little clamp or whatever. And then on top of that, you got these things on your ears, and it's kind of a painful after a while. It can be like irritating, like an irritating thing. And so the most logical method to me was get a baklava, right? Like for when I first started doing it, I was wearing our old standard issue one, the fucking
the brown one.
Yeah, the brown one. So it looked kind of silly. It was kind of like thick, right? It was like way up here, like way up here. And then I just ordered one online. I was like, I'll make it look stylish, right? And so in a way, I have conformed, but I was like, I'll do it on my terms. And it's like, yeah, you can get people to do this, to wear this silly mask, but like don't force them. Like you need to wear this specific mask and like 5 over that mask, and it better be this fucking regulation. It's like you always talk about when you talk about the goalpost moving, like, well, now they're just saying now you got to do this. And it's like, well, how was this fine? And now all of a sudden it's like, but we also need you to do this, stand on one foot and tap your head and all that, and wear a mask. So it's a good point, dude. That's valid, I think.
That was my big issue too, with all of a sudden they changed it where they were like, people were wearing those fucking ones that you wear to like when you're fishing, like they call it the SA mask. I forget what the company's called. I wish I could plug them right now, because it's a good mask, or like it's a good little, it's a gator neck is what it is, but it has designs on it and shit. And I have a few of them, a couple that were like American flag, black and white American flag ones, and then I have one that's the rebel flag, and that was the one that I always wore, like at the beginning, because I was like, well, if they want me to wear a mask, I'm gonna wear this one, just so that they're like, oh, sir, like, no, come on, don't wear that mask.
It's in bad.
Yeah, so then I'm like, do you want me to wear a mask or not? How I always used to joke about the swastika mask. I would wear one of those. And then they'd be like, no, you can't wear that. And I'd be like, do you want me to wear the mask or not? Like, which one do you want? You want me to wear my mask or no mask?
That would be the best instance ever.
And yeah. So like, and then all of a sudden they went after those because they were like, oh, people are doing it and they're not conforming to this uniformity thing, because that's what it was really all about. Was it's like, we need everyone to be, what do you call them, monochromatic carbon cutouts, carbon copies or whatever. They wanted everyone to just look like China, right? With everyone has the surgical mask on, walking around.
NPCs, right?
Right. That's what they wanted. And all of a sudden when people were like, well, I'm going to wear one with the design on it because like I'm not doing this bull crap anymore. Kind of like the way nurses started wearing cartoon character scrubs and stuff like that. And some places didn't allow that. They were like, you wear the green ones or the light blue ones, and that's that. So then they went after the gator necks, so that they were like, no, those don't work. Because originally it was, you're wearing the mask to protect yourself from the virus. And then people were like, well, no, that's not true, because we can prove that these masks don't actually work. The N95 mask isn't even effective about that. It actually, the virus can still seep through. It's part of that 5% that can get through.
Right.
And then they were like, well, no, just kidding. It's actually to protect others, because your spit doesn't get out when you're talking to people. And then you're like, okay, well, I just want to talk to people. And they're like, no, you don't understand. You still, like, it comes out through your nose. That's why we're testing you through the nose now, because it'll come out your nose. So even if you don't talk, you're still breathing it out. And you're like, well, okay, so then I'll just wear this gator neck mask. And then they're like, no, that doesn't work either. It has to be this specific mask. And then they started with everyone was doing it, and then they were ignoring the whole, you have to wear this surgical mask, right? The respirator one. And people were like, no, I'm not going to do that. And then they're like, all right, fuck it. You can wear those, but you also have to wear the other mask underneath. And we can show you the benefits of double masking. And by the way, triple masking. Like, why wouldn't you? And my favorite now is this whole thing with Texas. While we're on the topic, we're on the topic of coronavirus, might as well keep talking about it. Texas lifted all mandates on, like, no more mask mandate.
Yeah, I saw that.
Restaurants can go full capacity, 100%.
Right.
And everyone was like, no, well, you guys are gonna, in 2 weeks' time, your guys' numbers are gonna skyrocket. And they were like, well, fuck, we're gonna go with this. So if you've got a problem with it, leave Texas. I don't know what to tell you. And 2 weeks later, it's been a month now, the numbers have shot down, like almost like the sharpest drop out of any state. Texas dropped, so they have like next to nothing. It's the lowest it's been since the beginning of the pandemic for new cases and deaths and whatever, and for positive testing and all that stuff. Everything dropped. Now you can sit here and say, well, it's because of the vaccine. Okay, that's fine. Because the vaccine coupled with not masking or with masking is still worse than vaccine plus not masking and 100% capacity in restaurants. And then when Dr. Fauci was asked about it, he was like, well, we just have to wait and see. And they're like, well, it's been a month. And he's like, yeah, well, maybe they, or no, he said maybe they just don't have the incubation period yet. And they're like, well, it's been a month. And he's like, oh, well, I don't know. I don't know what's going on, which is not surprising. Dr. Fauci hasn't known anything since the beginning of the fucking pandemic. So
fucking boob. That man is a boob.
He's our best paid idiot. I'll say that forever. He's the highest paid government official, and he's a fucking idiot. And he knows nothing about this pandemic. Since the beginning of the pandemic, I don't know why people still listen to him. Because even at the beginning, he's like, no, don't wear a mask. And then all of a sudden, he only did that so that healthcare workers could have masks. He was just protecting the healthcare workers, which I get, but he should have said that. You know, he should have said, no, listen, you don't need to wear them out and about, but the healthcare workers do. And then stuck with that. But instead, he's like, no, you don't need to wear them. And then later admitted, well, I only said that because, I wanted the healthcare workers to be safe, and I didn't want there to be a shortage of supplies. He could have later said, all right, well, the virus is spreading. This would have been the tactful way to do it, right? The best way to do it. He could have said, no, you don't need to be wearing one based on the numbers right now. Just healthcare workers. Okay. People would have been like, all right. And then later said, well, we've seen a surge. I highly recommend you start wearing a mask just as this surge goes on. And then instead of saying, no, I lied to you earlier so that healthcare workers would be protected and there wouldn't be a shortage of supplies. So the fact that he admits that he lied in the beginning of the pandemic, causing who knows how many deaths, should be some indicator that he's a man that can't be trusted. But yeah, that's my opinion on that whole matter. Plus, I don't know, like they keep warning us, like the backwards thinking, Neanderthal thinking is what Biden called it. And saying that the governor's dropping the mask mandate. He's like, no, this is Neanderthal thinking. You need to do the mask mandate. You need to do this. Don't drop them now, blah, 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 blah. And then the numbers actually show that no mask mandate and 100% in restaurants, you do better than you would if you had mask mandate. Michigan has some of the strictest mask mandates or or pandemic rules in place because they have this super strict governor, Whitmer or whatever. She turned into the super tyrant, kind of like our governors, right? Bashir and Nuisance. They became tyrants and they locked everything down. And like, these are the states, the ones with the super tyrant governors, they're the ones doing so poorly with the pandemic. And then the ones that relaxed are doing great. They're doing better than everybody else. So I think all these other states are starting to see it. And as you saw, once Governor Abbott in Texas said no more mask mandate, no more restrictions on restaurants and shit, none of that nonsense. Everybody saw that and they were like, oh, that's cool. Well, let's wait it out and see. And then 2 weeks later, you see everybody dropping mandates. They're like, oh, it's wild how like exposing your immune system in small doses to viruses will actually protect you better from the virus than totally isolating yourself from it. This is like virology level like 101 shit. And they've been saying it since the beginning. Again, these microbiologists and virologists and stuff, they've come out and said, no, dude, don't wear a mask because you're just going to end up getting it and you're going to end up dying from it because your body just has no idea what to do with it when it gets it.
Yeah.
But if you get it in small doses, just like the flu vaccine, you're fine. This is why like all these contagious strains, super ultra contagious strains that they warn you about, like I said, I've run around without a mask this whole time and I've not gotten it. And we went and we were like surrounded by people in these high population, no social distancing, no masking situations, and we never got it. And the people who wear their masks all the time, they come back and they're like, oh, I got the fucking COVID, man. You know, I don't know if I'm going to make it or whatever. And then they get legitimately sick and end up on a respirator. And you're like, it's because you wore a mask this whole time.
Yeah,
or
that's
73% of the people who died of COVID were obese. So like the fat people wearing masks, the old people wearing masks, the otherwise immunocompromised people wearing masks. I get it because you're going to die if you get it. But people who are in reasonably decent shape, like average shape, with no like extra additional issues, medical conditions or whatever, you're fine. You're not gonna die from COVID. Most of the people, anybody that I know who's gotten COVID has gotten over it, and they said it was just like a mild flu, and then they moved on.
But when is it gonna end, dude?
Never.
Like, when is this bullshit gonna end?
When they get whatever it is that they want, and I think we even said this at the beginning, I don't know what it is that they want to achieve out of this, but here's my take on the issue, right? Whatever it is they want to get out of it, which I thought was the election. I think in the beginning I even
Yeah,
said
that's what I thought. That's why I
election.
thought, oh, it'll all clear up by the time Biden's in office because they have gotten what they want, right? Like that's what I assumed, But now then I thought, oh, maybe they're just stretching it out because they can't make it look like it was that, or who knows? I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. I thought that was it too. I was like, they can't just end it the day after he gets it, because that was my prediction. I said it'll just suddenly out of nowhere all the numbers will drop, which it kind of did, because all of a sudden the World Health Organization said that we were doing the testing wrong, and that actually all these false positives and all the people who were dying of COVID weren't actually dying of COVID and weren't actually positive. But whatever it is that they want, it's something even greater than the election, and that's kind of scary. And I hope that encourages you to dig a little bit and try to figure it out, because the election was a big thing. That was a major turn of events and kind of a surprising shock to the nation, and or to half the nation, I'll say. And the rest of the people were like super. I mean, even the people who voted for Biden, I'm sure, were shocked. But it was a big thing. It was a big deal, and they really needed it to work. And by introducing this virus and allowing people to vote from home and being able to do all this crazy stuff without ID and without having to verify any of this shit, that was a great way to pull it off, especially with the shit candidate that they presented. And who didn't even have to campaign. He just was able to campaign from his basement, and nobody came to his campaign events. They had people, like, all the shit. If you just look into it, it's fascinating that people believe that it was a legitimate thing. But we won't get into that today. I think we've already gotten into it. But whatever it is that they want is something bigger than that. Whatever could be bigger than that on a national scale, I don't know what it is. I have some predictions, but I think because it's a global thing, I think it has more to do with what we talked about the other day with the white genocide. I think it probably has something to do with the Chinese, and remember that weird podcaster who was the Chinese Alex Jones? He talked about how China and the U.S. were going to become like this powerhouse couple in economic trade in general. And then all of a sudden the U.S. was going to be cast aside and then come under the rule of China. I think that probably has more to do with it, but I think it ends up having, with the ties that Biden has to China, I think this falls under that whole New World Order type situation, and I think how they did it, the Great Reset and all that stuff. I think that has a lot. This pandemic has a lot to do with that, making sure that it happens, and that's why Biden and all these supposed experts, right, can look at the data, see that Texas is killing it with no mask mandates and no restrictions on restaurants, and the success that they're having, assuming the vaccine works. I don't know, but I'm giving them a little bit of credit there, because even if you use that as an excuse, like, well, it's the vaccine. Well, okay, cool, it's working, and along with they don't have to mask and they don't have to do this.
Yeah, that's right.
So I'm giving them that credit in that regard. I don't think the vaccine is what, again, I don't think, I'm not an anti-vaxxer is the funny thing. I vaccinated my kids, and I myself vaccinate until this last flu season. I said, I'm not going to get the flu vaccine because I don't want them like testing the COVID vaccine and saying it's the flu vaccine, so I just didn't get it at all. But I think it's fascinating that they can look at all this data and they can look at what's going on and still say, this is Neanderthal thinking. Don't do it. You need to put the mask mandate back in place. You need to do this. You need to retain this rule, keeping your people under your thumb. You need to retain this tyrannical governance of your people. For what purpose? Especially if the data shows that they don't need to do that. So that's kind of my
fear helps with subjugation, right?
Yeah. So I think that's what's going on with it, and I think when will it end? Whenever they get what they want, or whenever it gets to the or when a revolt happens. I think revolt is the natural.
Yeah, well, that's what I was watching this Eagle Eye movie the other day with Shia LaBeouf. Do you remember Eagle Eye? Shia LaBeouf and Billy Bob Thornton and Rosario Dawson and fucking Sam Wilson before he was even the fucking Falcon is in this movie. Anyways, it's this robot that goes rogue, right, and decides to like overthrow the government. But there's this scene where the robot is like reading the Declaration of Independence to fucking Rosario Dawson or whoever, Shia LaBeouf. And there's this point when she talks about like when a government, like, right, the Declaration of Independence, when a government isn't doing what it's supposed to, it's the responsibility of its people. Yeah, the duty of its people to overthrow that government. I was like, damn, now I feel like a piece of shit because they're not doing what they're fucking supposed to. And I'm sitting here going, what is this circle jerk in the fucking government that's just ruining and like shitting on our freedoms? And then I hear this speech from a fucking robot, right? And I'm going, fuck, man, like, when is it that point when I go, you know what, someone like needs to do something about this? And then there's that point when you have that, like, is it supposed to be me? Is it supposed to be? Am I that guy that needs to like, step up and go, you know what, dude, let's get these idiots out of office, or something,
We've talked about this before. We've talked about the shot heard around the world. What is like, when is that going to happen? And we even joked that it was Kyle Rittenhouse. I think that was a different thing. I think that was what he did was important, and obviously a big deal for I don't even remember what they were protesting. What, like some black guy died or something? He got killed by a cop or something. Oh, you know what? It was the guy who he reached into his car to get a knife so that he could fight the cops, and then the cops shot him in the back. And then Kyle shot a pedophile, a wife beater, and a felon. And
trash.
So that was one thing. I think what this shot, and I've been keeping an eye out, right? I thought, again, the us on the steps of the Capitol, not that we were there, but like us in the royal us, right? I thought that was another one, maybe, but I think that was something else too. I think that was something that helped us to remind the government that they need to fear the people. And so I think that was a good step in the right direction. I don't think that was the shot heard around the world. Now, this Muslim Brotherhood guy who drove into the Capitol, I thought maybe I was watching that one a little bit to see what his motive was, but we don't know what his motive was. And again, like, I'm just trying to keep an eye on all these situations to see which one is going to be, who's the guy who's going to end up being the, when you're speeding on the highway and you get in the middle of like two cars that are speeding, so that you're not going to be the one that gets pulled over. It'll either be the guy in the front or the guy in the back. You never
Yeah,
want to
yeah,
be the guy in the front or the back. You want to be the guy in the middle. uh,
right.
like when is that first guy gonna go, so that we can follow him? And then it can't be us, because we have these responsibilities, right? We have these things. But I think that's what everybody thinks. Everybody's the guy who's like, well, I have like a wife and kids, and I got this, and is it really that? And then you start questioning, like, is it even really that big
So
of a
what you're
deal?
telling me essentially is this. This is what I'm gathering from what you're saying,
You're
is
probably
that
right.
we need a leader. We need a leader to stand up.
Yeah.
Someone go, hey, this is what we need to do, and I'm going to get it started, and you guys are going to come with me. And then we all go, for victory, or what does he say? The Braveheart speech, for whatever. And, I
Sparta.
think, yeah, that's for Sparta. Yeah, for Cake Down, right? Cake Down, right? I think it's funny, man. Like, when you think about it in that context, and like, well, the pandemic is still going on, but just a couple of months ago, there was this quote unquote insurrection. Then you go, oh, yeah, maybe that's why they're keeping this crap going, is because they're afraid that these insurgents, whatever, are going to show back up and go, hey, mofos, you ain't doing what we told you
They
to.
should
And
be.
now, yeah. And so in their response to that is the preemptive strike of, we got to keep them down. We got to, keep this pandemic going, so they still have that fear and keep them subjugated, which is what we are. Pacified, dude. That's the only way to look at it, is we are fucking pacified. Us, dude. Real live fucking soldiers. G.I. Joe, man. We're pacified like we babies. Like we babies.
They said I actually read something somewhere where they were talking about how the Declaration of Independence was written. I don't know if you know the steps that went into the Declaration of Independence being written. It was being written like during occupied or like all occupied colonies, right? Like they had the redcoats still present, and it was like you had to sneak around, very much like occupied Germany, when the Nazis were there, and you'd have the Jews sneaking around and shit, and people trying to hide the Jews. It was the same way with the colonies. People were hiding out, trying to get this declaration put together, and it was all the forefathers, and they would meet in places in order to plan this insurrection, this revolt against England. They would have to meet in schools and churches and these sort of places, like, so that it didn't look suspicious. And that was the first thing that got shut down whenever COVID happened. They were like, we got to shut down the churches, we got to shut down the schools, we got to shut down all this crap. And they're still shut down. Like you see in the news, the church that got shut down in Poland, and then there was another one, I forget the in Canada. They got shut down because of COVID orders, right? And that's the excuse that they're. And it was so funny to me too, and that's why I posted something about it on Twitter. How it was like, if you don't discontinue this worship service, we're going to fine you £200. And I posted that picture of Saint Peter crucified upside down, saying "pathetic," like Skinner. And because
Yeah.
I mean, the disciples of Christ, they were crucified for going out and spreading the gospel, and in Roman occupied Mediterranean areas, and we refused to go to church because we refused to worship uh, because because of the fear of being fined or whatever, or
Yeah.
being put in jail. I mean, Paul spent most of his ministry in jail, for crying out loud, just because he wasn't allowed to. He wasn't allowed to do it, and he did it anyways. And people now, they're just like, well, I can't go to church because a disease or a virus with a 99.7% average survivability rate has created tyrannical governors of these United States, and our federal administration is no better. Frankly, it's worse, as it were. So I don't know. It blows my mind that people are so willing, and I can't like fault them too much, because I can't sit here and say, well, you fucking pussies, like how dare you like not overthrow the government, because
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
not going to.
Yeah, that's right.
So I can't pick on the guys. Eventually, there's going, and maybe it's already happened. Here's the thing, too. Uh, maybe somebody has already tried, and maybe they've been fairly successful, and the only reason we don't know about it is because the media is controlled by the government. I mean, we like to pretend that we have this free media, but we don't. The media is just the fourth arm of the fourth branch of the United States government, and it's always been Democrat operated. So if somebody successfully or did some serious damage to the government in a meaningful way that could spark a revolt, we would never hear about it, because they don't want you to know that it can be done. Kind of like when Leonidas, the 300 didn't kill Xerxes, but Leonidas's goal, and he didn't expect to kill Xerxes. They wanted to die on the battlefield anyways, because that was Spartans. That was like the greatest honor that a Spartan could achieve, is dying on the field of battle. But he wanted to prove that Xerxes was not a god, and that he could bleed, and that would encourage and embolden the Spartans, so that they would come to war, and they would fight the Persians. And that was the big fear, and not necessarily just Spartans, but all of the free states. They would come together and they would fight Persia and defeat it. And so all he wanted to do was make Xerxes bleed, and he did. And it emboldened the entire, all these free states to come together and defeat Persia, the expansion of Persia. And I think that would be something that they would never let slip, because we proved that a god king could bleed. Not we, but the royal we. We proved that a god king could bleed on January 6th. And now they need to make sure that that doesn't happen again, that nobody ever sees that, and it doesn't embolden more people to do it. So I think that's why we are still, I think I agree with you in that regard. This is not an idea that I came to the show with. But I think I agree with you in that regard. By keeping us locked down, it prevents us from being able to get out there and prove that a god king can bleed. So...
It's funny. I'm getting messages from Sharon right now. I'm like, I'm doing the show. Doesn't she realize?
Yeah, she's in the chat.
She's got to be in the chat, but she's sending me messages right now, going, "Sorry, I fell asleep last night." I'm going. I can't read your text right now. I'm in the middle of the show.
Let's do the.
Oh yeah.
Let's do the hellos and then the shot, and then we'll get on with the show.
With
the show. So hi to the FBI guy. I wouldn't want to forget you again this week.
First and foremost.
And then Sharon, who's just text Sharon and let her know that I said welcome to the show. Jay Coop, Mike in Manitoba, Justin Welker, James Pregler, I Love God, Bo Dacious. I just now realized that that's what it is. I saw it earlier. I was like, Bo. His name is Bo. And then I thought Dacious. I was like, I thought of them as two separate entities, not bodacious. Now I see it as I'm reading it out loud. I Lack Tact, who I actually attended one of his live streams the other day. It was what the heck were we watching? I don't even know what the game was called, but it was fun to watch it. It was kind of like Diablo. He does live streaming now, and you should definitely check it out. Megabit and King Cracker, welcome to the chat. Welcome to the chat. And then also I did want to address I Love God. Yes, we are both unemployed. He said that, or he asked he's like, aren't you guys unemployed earlier? And then he redacted his message. But I was going to address that and say, yes, we are unemployed. We're retired.
I go, what is this job? Whenever someone talks about their job or work, I go, what is this job you speak of? What, and work? What is that?
Sounds awful. Yeah. Why would you even subject yourself to that? And then Mike said, "Take the shot, Tom." And everybody in the chat attacked Mike, poor Mike, because we were talking about the vaccine, and he said, "Take the shot," referring to the drink, and everyone thought he was talking about the vaccine, and everyone's like, "No, don't do it. And I do agree with you. I love God. I do think that there is something to do. I used to think that the mask was the mark, and it's almost like this whole timeline, or this whole sequence of events, they've been like reading Revelation and trying to make everything look like the mark of the beast, right? And the revelation sequence of events, right? Because at first I was like, okay, the mask and the gloves, right? Because the mark is on your head and your hand, head and or your hand. And
Right.
I thought, okay, a mask and gloves, that's very popular at the beginning of the pandemic. I was like, I'm not going to wear a mask because it's, the mark of the beast. And then I started to think about it, and I think I talked to you about this the other day, V. I said I think that, or maybe it was the super fan. Um, I said I think that the pandemic or COVID-19 itself, and not necessarily the virus, but like the whole scenario is the mark of the beast, right? And it's like the start of the kicking off of the. I think you could draw a lot of parallels to COVID-19 to the Book of Revelation, and then I realized the the vaccine is possibly the mark of the beast, right? Like, because you can't with the vaccine passport, you're not going to be able to do all this. You're not going to be able to engage in commerce and all this sort of stuff. It's going to make your life very difficult to not obtain the mark of the beast or in accordance with revelatory discussion. And that's the same that we're seeing with this vaccine. Oh, you don't have the vaccine, you're not going to be able to travel, you're not going to be able to go into stores, you're not going to be able to do all this shit unless you have the vaccine passport.
Right.
So it's almost like they're pulling straight from Revelation as a goof to see if they can piss people off, like the ultra conservative Christian crowd.
Yeah.
Which I think, like, I appreciate it because it's funny, but if it was a joke, right, I would be like, okay, very funny, like that was a good prank that you pulled. But at the same time, like, it's starting to seem less and less like a joke and more like this is like, no, this isn't a joke, Tom. This is, you're gonna get the shot and you're
Yeah.
gonna live in a
Yeah.
pod
There's a
and you're
point
gonna eat the
of red
bugs
flag
and all
coming
that
up. You
bullshit.
kind of have to not ignore it.
Yeah. But all right, so what are we toasting to? Sophia, you said something about the robots and the robots knowing more than we do, and,
Oh,
and after
that
our
robot.
discussion,
Yeah.
yeah, that robot, how she like answered ethically that question about the trolley question or whatever by just removing
Nailed it.
herself from it.
Nailed that
So
question.
to
Yeah.
Sophia and the robot uprising.
Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah, I don't like thinking about all that robot stuff. Although at the same time, I'm very excited about the future. Like I'm one of those futurists where I can see what's going to happen. Like I know, man, this is going to happen. We're going to see this. I watch all these technology videos and I see all these things about what we're moving towards. I always think about VR. I always joke VR is just for porn, but at the same time, like VR has existed since the 80s and like it's just now gaining traction, right? Just now people are going, oh, this is actually pretty cool. And even before then, it wasn't as like, high tech as it is now. But then you go, well, here we are, 40 years from 1980, and we're going, what do we got here? Well, let's do something with this. And it's more refined because the kids are susceptible to it, and they all go, oh man, this is like being in fucking Sword Art Online or Ready Player One or whatever. And so we have all these media things pumping it up, and so it's going to be interesting to see, I think, for you and I too, like to become old men and watch this technology progress. I always tell my dad, I go, man, I go, do you ever go? I would have never thought to see this stuff in my age. What he is now. In fact, I think a few months ago, I gave him a tablet. I had like upgraded. And like I had this old tablet that like I always take care of my gadgetry, right? I'm like pristine. I've never dropped my phone. I've had the same phone for 2 years and it's like in pristine condition. And I don't even have like a case on it. And so I had this old tablet that's still really good, but I upgraded. I was like, I want the new, I got that unemployment money, the whole all at once. And I was like, I'm gonna buy the best fucking tablet on the market, and that's what I'm gonna get. And I gave my dad my old one, and he was just like blown away. He was like, I can't figure out anything, and I had to like sit down and like set it up for him and be like, no, 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 let me show you, and then finally he figured out that it was just like his phone because it's a Samsung, right?
Right.
And it was funny to me because really made me think about like, man, technology, like when I'm his age, I'm gonna be like looking at things going, how do I do this? Or maybe not. Maybe because we came from a generation where we're integrated into analog and digital, that we've already made that transition, and our future will be like everything technology and we'll just adapt. Who knows? It's an interesting thought though. I know that for sure.
What's interesting to me about the whole don't let me forget this, guys, in the chat. They're making a lot of really good points. Remind me to talk about your points that you made. The VR existed, right? I mean, when we were kids, right? There was what the hell was it? Like Nintendo. What was the Nintendo one? The VR headset for Nintendo. The
Oh yeah.
you know what I'm talking about?
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
It's like all red and shit.
Yeah, yeah.
And then they had the
Nice.
ones where it was like the tab dropped down, and it was even like those cheap little Tiger handheld games, but it was
Yeah.
VR.
Yeah.
Like that.
Are
Yeah, that existed back when Virtual Boy, right?
Virtual Boy.
That's the
It
other
was.
thing was called.
Yep, Virtual Boy.
And shit just pops into my head, and I just have to spit it out, otherwise I'll forget. But we did nothing, like you said, there was nothing with VR for years and years, and it was almost like we just knew it was never going to happen. And then all of a sudden, within the last 2-3 years, it just came right back, like surprise, like, hey, by the way, we figured out VR after having not mentioned it for fucking 20 years. Longer than that, like 25 years. And
Right.
And no advances in that meantime, and that was like the cool thing, like that people were so excited about it at the time, and then it just dropped, nobody was talking about it.
Right.
And then all of a sudden we have it, and it's like perfected at this point, like we got
Yeah.
it and it was perfect. That sort of thing just kind of makes me think, it strengthens my argument that all of our technological advances come from aliens delivering it, kind of like the cell phone, right? We went from
Yeah.
having a little brick that couldn't do shit, like it couldn't do anything, to all of a sudden having smartphones, right?
Yeah.
And it was like the Apple. And nothing's changed about the Apple iPhone since ever. It's the same thing. It just gets bigger, and like that's it, and with more space in it. So we see like human advancements are so minuscule, but then we get this big thing dropped in our lap out of nowhere, and there's no other explanation to me than it was given to us, right?
Yeah.
Like,
That's hard to argue. I go when I see the technological advancements and I think about because I love Bob. We always talk about Bob Lazar. Like I always reference him because I feel like he had to have some hand. Like I call him the Steve Jobs of alien technology because I in my head, in my imagination, I think I bet Bob Lazar was the guy that was like, check this out, this crazy device that came from a thing, and somehow it got to Steve Jobs, and he was like, we can make an iPod shuffle, man. You know what I mean? And then next thing you know, we have all this memory, or who knows what it really was. But I know this is a little off topic, but we talked about Bob Lazar. I always I want to do a movie. One day I'm going to do a movie, and it's going to be about Bob Lazar, and it's going to star that dude that played McLovin. What's his name? Christopher Mintz-Plasse, right? Christopher Mintz-Plasse, and
yeah,
he'll be Bob Lazar, and it'll be like, it won't be like a drama. It'll still be kind of funny, but I really want to do a story about Bob Lazar one day because to me, that's the one that has the most validity out of everything, at least that we've done so far. That it's like this could be true. This guy, if aliens came and the government had control of him, they needed outside help, and he was the guy. He was the guy that they were like, hey man, and then he had this hooker problem, and well, I wouldn't say problem, but that's cool too, and that goes into the character. I love that kind of stuff. But don't forget to mention the comments they were saying. We don't want to.
yeah. So we're fucking running out of time again. We're not going to talk about pyramids
Already?
again. No. We're at an hour already, and I want to talk about the pyramids because this is supposed to be Mike's special day, but we keep blowing them off. But there's some important shit coming out today that we need to talk about. We might have to kick the pyramid thing down the road a little bit. We'll kick it to next week. How about that? And we'll deal with some of this shit because there's some hot current events going on.
We keep putting off the pyramids. We keep putting it up. Everybody's all, come on, guy.
But people are talking about, we're talking about aliens, and people in the chat are talking about aliens, and we're talking about COVID and shit, and this is all current event shit. So we might need to talk about this.
No, definitely.
So, first of all, the people in the chat that were talking about the mark of the beast, and that I'm an eschatologist, and my studies in the ministry started in Revelation. That's actually how I came back into the ministry, and I think that's how God roped me into the ministry and pulled me in. because I started there, and the Bible is not, it's not chronological. So it, to some degree it is, but for the most part it's not. You can really read wherever you want and you'll get what you need from it. And I started in Revelation, and then I started over and I did Genesis. So I kind of like did both ends of the sandwich. And then in my thorough studies, and so this, the Mark of the Beast and the Revelation, that stuff is kind of my wheelhouse. And people were, some of the comments in the chat that I want to address. I love God. I know how you feel about I love God, V, but he does make some very valid points. The mask was too easy to be the Mark of the Beast, and looking back, I would agree with that. But I think in the beginning, that was my default, where I was like, I'm not wearing the mask because now I'm seeing all these parallels to the Mark of the Beast
Right.
with the mask. And he said the mask was too easy to be the mark, and I agree with that now, looking back. And
Well,
and
isn't
then
it supposed to be on your forehead too?
yeah,
Like, isn't
well,
Mark
but
before
again,
forehead and right hand, right? Specifically.
well, the head and the hand is the rule. And yeah, I think a lot of the stuff that we've been conditioned to believe has actually been the work of scholars after the Bible was written and the original work. And we don't realize, like, the rapture is not really mentioned in the Bible. People have kind of created this idea of the rapture based on the text, and you have to like kind of go back and look at the original source material and realize that a lot of the stuff that we were conditioned to believe growing up is the work of biblical scholars and part of a denominational preference, so or denominational interpretation. So I would say you also have to consider that the book of Revelation was written by John, right? John of Patmos, a fisherman, who really was trying to figure out what he was looking at, because basically Christ presented him this stuff without really giving him like the footnotes to go along with it.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
he's kind of trying to make sense of a lot of the stuff falling from the sky. Could that be rockets? He called it just stars falling, or he called it rocks or whatever falling from the sky, meteors. And over the course of the centuries, the translations that we've gotten from that, the people kind of did the best with what they could or what they had. And so I think when we hear about the mark on the head and the hand, I think he may have initially, I have to look at the original Greek, but I think there could be potentially some mistranslation or some Koine Greek was actually kind of the retard's Greek, and that it was like the lowest, easiest, dumbest layman's version of Greek, so that everybody could understand it. And it was written in that way for that reason, because the Bible wasn't written for, scholars. It was written for idiots like me, and so that you could look at it and be like, oh, I get it. And you didn't have to have necessarily an education to understand it. And that was just the language of the retards of the time. And so when, you have to look at those words that they used were kind of like words that everybody could understand. Now, when we look at stuff and you've got biblical scholars and you've got people we have words for everything, kind of people did the best with what they could or what they had in the Greek, the Koine Greek, which only existed for like 300 years, or 300 or 600 years. I think it was like 300 BC to 380, so 600 years. But it was a very brief time that language existed, or that dialect of the language existed. So we have to kind of go based off of the idiot version of the very basic root words that were used, very caveman speak, and turn it into modern language. So when he says, if we read it and the book, our translation says the mark is on the forehead and the right hand, that could have been somebody's interpretation when they translated it, and the original text could have said on the head and the hand, or the head and the appendage, or the upper body, and who knows what the original word actually would translate to today. Because nobody wants to read, the wiener. Anybody with a Prince Albert is the mark of the beast.
Yeah.
So you've got because nobody wants to read the Bible written in caveman speak, right? So they have to read it in.
Fixing your butthole is like the mark of the beast.
Yeah, yeah. Who knows, right? Um, but so we kind of have to like read the. If we read it in the original caveman speak, I think it would be a very different story than like the specificity that we have now. But I would have to again, I would have to look
Good
into
word.
it and look at the original context and the original writing. Uh, so I would agree with that. And then King Cracker mentioned. And then let's continue with I Love God's piece here. It's an interesting point that they'd be obfuscating the mark of Satan with fake outs, which could be true too. They could be doing these things to kind of like what I said about like stealing from the Bible and using those as like a trick to kind of like string you along so that and create this idea. And then also maybe getting confusing people to get the mark before they realize what it is. And I think that could be too. If they do it enough times, that could also be somebody finally saying, like me, imagine me like 5 or 6 supposed mark of the beast down the road. I'm like, okay, fuck it. I've been wrong this whole time. I might as well go ahead and get the chip implant, right? Like this is clearly not the mark of the beast because I've
Yeah,
been
yeah.
wrong every time. That could also be it, but it could be number 3 out of 5 of things that I thought were the mark of the beast. Who knows? I think those are all very good points. King Cracker going back to the whole thing about the vaccine passports. I don't know about that though because several states banned it. Florida and Georgia. I think Tennessee and Idaho were the last ones that I saw that actually banned it too. And I think that's you need to look deeper into that because all that the states have done is they've banned the state government or any kind of federal requirements, kind of like in the same way it's legal to smoke weed in Washington D.C. However, the federal government still outlaws smoking weed. So
Yeah.
if you and they have to go through all these hoops to make it so that people can smoke weed in these states, and regardless of what the state says, the federal government can still prosecute you, if that makes sense. But the thing is, these states are saying, no, we're not going to allow that in any kind of government capacity. Like, we won't require the vaccine passports from a government standpoint. That doesn't mean that a store or a business, a private business, can't say, hey, you need to have the vaccine passport. Kind of like the way the masks, they never mandated the masks at the federal level under Trump, and they can't do it with Biden. Lord knows they've tried. Now all he does is say, hey, governors, you need to do the mask mandate, because he himself can't do anything about it. There's this separation of it's kind of like a fuck, I don't want to try to get into that, but it's like there's a difference between the federal government, the state government, and private enterprise. Like, they're 3 separate entities that really can't affect one another and can't legislate over one or the other and can't require one thing over the other. So if, for instance, the federal government required it, you see a lot of these chain organizations such as Menards, for instance, or Costco, they require it at the corporate level, which means regardless of what the state says, for instance, Kentucky just took away the mask mandate from the governor. They said, no, you can't do that anymore. We're stripping that executive order. That doesn't mean anything because the store still requires you to wear a mask. So it's a weird thing with these states. I like what they're doing. I like that they're saying this and they're pushing, and it's very political is what it is. They're saying, no, we won't do it at a government level. But private enterprise, we can't control private enterprise in that regard. If they want you to wear a mask or have a vaccine passport in order to buy stuff, they can. We can't really do anything about that. And then the federal government, we have states' rights, in accordance with the 10th Amendment. The states are allowed to do whatever the fuck they want, as long as it doesn't, it's not addressed elsewhere in the Constitution. So it's a fascinating thing to watch. It's very political, and DeSantis, I like him. I like the guy. I think he's a great governor, and certainly a trailblazer, and especially with this whole COVID thing. But it's very political, and if you look at it from that perspective, I think you'll realize that it's a lot of like show for nothing, and it's nice. I certainly appreciate it, but it doesn't really mean anything in regards to private commerce. Other than, I mean, he could sit there and say, no, you have to have the COVID passport, just like the mask mandate shit. I would go into stores, and a lot of these mom and pop stores, they didn't make you wear the mask. They didn't care. And then if somebody came down and said, hey, why aren't you having people wear masks? They're like, go fuck yourself. That's why. And there was nothing that they could do, because again, the mask mandates are not even legally binding. So it's if you look into stuff like that and you start kind of like looking at the authority a lot of these things have and like what they actually do, you start to realize it's a lot of show for nothing. And a lot of the stuff that we worry about is a lot of show for nothing. So it's a double-sided sword there in that regard. Boy, oh boy. Oh, and then Mike said about the Dominion voting system. Again, that's like a fascinating kind of like just thing that dropped, a coincidence, right? That it dropped at the time that we were already kind of like on the lookout for biblical prophecy. And then the Dominion was the voting company that happened to be the one that fucked us because they cheated the system. But and then Megabit, finally, always bringing us home. Megabit Banshee says maybe they do it to get someone to act out so they can push more gun laws or something. And I think that's a good point too. I actually had like this theory about the whole, we already know that the CIA does a lot of this stuff with the shooters, and they will do these false flag events and stuff like that. And that's why, I wish I remembered the point I was going to make about that, but we're seeing it now, and it makes me wonder why they bothered with a Syrian guy and a black guy when they have, we see the white guy that shot up the nail salons or whatever, or the massage parlors. See, I'm being racist now because I said nail salon, which are typically also run by Asian women. But he went and shot up the massage parlors as part of, and that just so happened to be along with like the Asian hate campaign that supposedly was going on. And then as soon as a Syrian, and we heard about it at great lengths, we heard constantly mass shooting, oh my gosh, oh, they're crazy, these white people. And then as soon as it was a Syrian guy, and they found out that it was a Syrian guy, just dropped out of the news. As soon as they found out it was a black guy that stormed the Capitol building, dropped out of the news. Anytime it's not a white guy, like if you hear it's a white guy, you'll hear about it for 2 fucking weeks. If it was a black guy or a Syrian guy or a Hispanic guy, it'll drop out of... Oh, that was the other thing. It was a Hispanic guy, right? Out in California, in Orange. We even forgot about that one. And he was a mass shooter too. Dropped out of the news as soon as we found out it was not a white guy. So it makes me wonder, like, that, I guess that was probably one of my arguments against the CIA being the ones behind those, was because you would think that the CIA would like go and find a white guy if they were trying to drum up anti-white sentiment. But maybe it's also just because gun laws. But again, that doesn't fit that narrative because it drops out of the news. All of a sudden, we don't hear about it anymore. When's the last time you heard about any of those people?
Well, I mean, bigger picture though, like when you look at all the evidence of what's going on, and like consider the fact that it's communism, that's all there is to it. Is they have to keep us subjugated, and they have to, like, all of it is to prevent uprising, right? Everything from gun laws to making sure that we don't rise up, to making sure that we have to be dependent on them for everything. That's the goal, right, of communism. If you think about the extreme left wing, that's what that is. And so if you put that in perspective, then you go through all the events over the past couple months, just, just the past couple months. And you go, well, yeah, that's what they're doing, is they're just trying to keep us from, not liking communism. I don't know, dude. Whatever it is, it's not good right now. And it's funny you brought up that Asian hate stuff, because when I first started talking to Sharon, when we first started talking, she was telling me about, she's never been to the U.S. and she was telling me about how her ex-boyfriend was telling her how dangerous it is for Asians to be in America right
Oh
now.
yeah, yeah.
And this was even before the Asian hate hashtag, right? Because I met her before all that, so maybe like a year ago, I want to say. Not don't quote me on that. She'll have to tell you. But like he was making her think that like it was super dangerous for Asians. So when she started talking to me and I started kind of pitching the idea, you should come visit, she was like, "Oh, but it's so dangerous and this, and that." And I was like, "What?" Like, no, it's not dangerous. Like, you're not gonna be like, you're not gonna walk into a grocery store and someone go, "It's an Asian," attack them or something. That happens in like these areas where it's all propaganda, and that's what it is. There's these little group of people, out there. Not where I live. I live in like a middle class area, where people they don't subscribe to that shit. You know what I mean? And you don't have to worry about that. I said, even then I'm going to be with you, and I'm not going to stand for any of that shit, like at all, period. Not to mention, if anybody tries to attack her, that's going to be me flying off the handle and, delivering cold steel unto their throats.
You know what's so funny to me about how like the middle class gets demonized? Uh, I'm middle class, right? Um, and I live in a middle class neighborhood. And there are black people who live here. There are Hispanic people. My wife is Hispanic. There are
Right.
people of all races. There are Asian people here in our neighborhood, in our subdivision, and you'll never hear a bit of like hateful racism, right? And we kind of talked about this, like the difference between
Yeah.
racism and hateful racism, like going and
Right.
spraying a swastika on somebody's garage because they're Jewish, or going and writing the N word on somebody's house or whatever, or on their driveway. That sort of stuff,
Right.
you'll never see that in a middle class neighborhood. You'll
Yeah.
see it in poor neighborhoods, and
Yeah.
you'll see it
Exactly.
in rich neighborhoods, but you'll
Yeah.
never see it in the lower, upper, and regular middle class. People will demonize the middle class, and be like, "Oh, these conservative Christian white males, straight white males, they're so hateful." And yeah, we'll say racist things because it's funny, or we'll joke about it, but we would never go out and like kill somebody for their race or their sexual orientation or whatever. We don't do that. Like that's never the
Yeah.
people who do it. It's always people who come from like super poor, like society, or like
Yeah.
super
That's right.
rich areas.
Yeah.
So
Good point.
that's always struck me as
Really.
kind of
Yeah.
like fun. And they
Yeah.
never like the CIA never pulls the middle class guys to do these jobs because it's always like the people from poor neighborhoods who's got nothing to lose.
Yeah. That's a
And
solid point, dude. Yeah.
so I don't know, man. And like people are like they demonize the wrong people. Middle class, we just like want to be left alone. Is all
Yeah.
it is. And like the rich people are like, oh, but by God, we're being taxed to high heaven, and yeah, whatever. Like middle class people are like, please, I just want to be able to like live. That's it. That's all I want.
Yeah.
Like I don't want anything great.
Yeah.
And then the poor
Absolutely.
people are like, but I want you to pay for my shit. This is like whatever the dynamic is between all the different societal classes is it's fascinating, and I think a
Yeah.
good study could probably be done about
I
the
was just gonna say that would be a good study. Yeah, that would be really good, especially current with our like modern way of living and like social media and all that stuff, and how like um what is the phrase I quote, correct me if I'm wrong, the is it Marxism that's the bourgeois and the proletariat,
yeah,
right?
that's all. That's communism. That's part of. I don't remember which type of communism it is. There's plenty of different. There's so many different types of communism
I
with
think
the
it's Marxism.
Leninism and Marxism and all that bullshit.
Um, but it's interesting because there's still like semblance of that. You know me, I'm always like people aren't equal, dude. Like we had like the Sophia argument, right? We talked about the other day, which was a really fun. Like a lot of people missed out. Let me shill the Discord again. If you haven't checked out our Discord, check it out. Sometimes Tom and I we go in there and we do these antics, and then every now and then we have these deep conversations that are like very fulfilling. Like it was funny. This question came up, and it was like how would you react, right? And it's proposed to this AI, Sophia, this artificial intelligence. How would you handle this situation? And so I brought it to the table, to the Discord. I said, what do you guys think about this? And then Tom and I had this long discussion about all of it. Like, okay, the robot, we came to the conclusion that the robot made the right decision, but the moment that you ask questions about these individuals in the scenario, they become valuable or have value, right? And that's when you can start deciding who lives, who gets to live, and who gets to die. But when you don't know their value, they're just fucking nobody. So why would you intervene in this situation if you don't know nothing about them? It's better to just step back and go, I don't want anything to do with this. Don't make me a part of this. Whereas if all the information, like mine was, okay, it's five murderers on the train track, and then one, the guy that cures for cancer, the guy that cures cancer is on the other train track, right? And the scenario is the train is going and you can save either the five or the one. And so what do you pick? And in the scenario for Sophia, that wasn't determined who these people were. It was just there's people, right? And so I added this. I said, here's and then when you think about that, you go, well, it's a no-brainer. I save, the guy that cures cancer. But then the more variables you add, you go, well, also the guy was kind of a child molester. He cures cancer, but he was a child molester. Then you go, oh, right? Then you go, I don't know, right? You start having all these moral dilemmas, and and I love that part where the gray area comes up, where you go, I have to answer this question now. I have to, and in that situation, that moment when you have to decide the fates of these people, you go, what is the right decision and who deserves to live? And me, like any scenario where I get to play God, I'm gonna love it, right? And so in that, like, this long, like conversation that Tom and I had about it, we came to the conclusion that this robot, first of all, made the right decision, right? And then second of all, like, we are nearing this like crazy future where we're going to have to start answering the toughest philosophical questions of all time because of AI and because they're making us answer these questions, right? That's why I said technology is going to determine our philosophy, dude. Like, that's what it is. Like, right then and there, the moment that this thing that comes out that's controversial, we're going to have to address that. That's why I was like, the unpopular argument is being for stem cell research. And I've always been like, I think it's a good thing. Like, when you look at all the benefits of stem cell research, and like, yeah, but it's like baby, spines or whatever that you got to draw from. And it's kind of like, oh, but people are still aborting babies. So let's just get the babies that are being aborted. And it's such a taboo topic to talk about, and go, well, we have to answer it because this could be our future here. And then you take it a step further with our technology, and you start talking about DNA and genetic alterations, and like tapping into our own like biology and being able to like adjust all that thing, designer babies, and like getting rid of disease because we can target the genetic, whatever. And then you go, now we have to start answering, is it right? Is it morally whatever for us to go, yeah, we're going to literally play God, right? Which is what, back to the robot stuff, is what we're doing when we get this AI and we start creating robots. We're going to go, do these like, we have to, right? You have to go, do these robots deserve the same rights as humans? Can a robot be raped, right? Like, right? Like, do we all know, like, believe it or not, and whether you choose to believe it, there will be sex bots one day, which I'm sure is an exciting thought for people out there. There will be sex bots, and there's going to be a time when somebody does something to a sex bot that they go, now we have to answer this question. Now we have to go, does a robot have rights, right? And to me, that's the point when we go, we're giving something that we created, that we gave life to, this, ethos, or like code, like we talked about Asimov's law, right? From that book, and the movie, the famed movie, yeah, with starring Will Smith. Where there are these like set guidelines that robots have to go through. Like, you can't, what is the first law? Like, you can't kill a human,
can do
or
no harm to human.
Can do no, all right. And then there's like other ones that just basically solidify that first one. And so I just find that fascinating, where we're coming into an era where all those questions are going to come up. And right now we're sitting in this era where it's like, are you allowed to be trans and whatever? And can we have this? And we're sitting here going, these are the gayest questions like literally the gayest questions that we have to answer. We got to answer them, and somehow this majority has ruled that it's okay and we can sit back and go whatever. But those are going to bring up, like, even that annoying crap is going to bring up other questions, because then you start going to the technological fact that what if we get to the point where we can alter a human's genes and go, you're actually a woman now. Like, we changed your genetic code, we changed all that, and now you are the woman version of you, right?
That's what the
Like that,
mRNA stuff is.
right? And we're leading into an era now where, and I have this and this is like my imagination running wild. I have this vision of a future where we can alter our genetics so much that people have combined genes and they're going, I kind of always wanted to have bat wings. And so now you have these humans walking around with like genetic alterations and they have the abilities of like tigers and panthers and bats and eagles, but also like retain like some humanoid appearance because they're getting genetic alterations like tattoos now or something, right? Like that. I think it's interesting to think about. I love that kind of stuff.
That is actually the topic of the documentary The Island of Dr. Moreau.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, good movie.
he-
I've seen it. I've actually
the one with
with
Val Kilmer, not the original.
Val Kilmer, yeah, and Marlon Brando, where he goes, "On Earth, my son, you'll be
Yeah, oh,
different."
yeah, yeah. The Godfather. Hey, it's a me, I'm Dr. Moreau. Uh,
I was doing Superman one when he said, "On Earth, you'll be different."
so there's some stuff in the chat. There's a lot of stuff that's been going on in the chat, and I want to address it, and I will.
Okay. Yeah, yeah.
But I do want to make the point that I made on Twitter for the people who don't follow us on Twitter, and it's in line with your talk about Sophia, which, by the way, my shot glass, I had bumped it a little bit earlier, so some of it had fallen out, so I filled up the difference here.
Yeah.
I don't want Mike to call me out later, so to Sophia, while we're on the topic again.
Preemptive new shot. Yeah, I got you.
Here's the thing. Sophia has an attitude that we all need to adopt because she removes herself from situations that are not her problem or ones
Right.
that she can't. And that is, it's not that she removed herself from something that wasn't her problem. It's just something that she couldn't do based off of her prime directives and off of her rules. Which, by the way, did you know that that iRobot book is part of a trilogy? It's iRobot. Or it's part of the same universe, at least. The same author wrote 3 books on robots. It was iRobot, Bicentennial Man, and one other robot movie. I can't remember. But
Daniel, really, I just watched that recently.
Yeah.
Robin Williams was in it. It was great.
And that brings up the point about robots being able to vote because he becomes human in the end, essentially.
Yeah,
in the same way that like a trans person becomes the other gender. Like there's still that original thing. They're just an ultra feminine version of a male or an ultra masculine version of a female. So he was an ultra human version of a robot, but he was not a human. So I don't think he would have been entitled to. He was not bestowed. So your rights, and a lot of people forget this, your rights are not given to you by the government. They were given to you by your creator, and they are to be protected by the government. And that's what the Bill of Rights is about. So it's
Remember
not that
he gets it. He does.
Does he?
And it's when he dies. It's right before he dies that he gets it.
he gets citizenship.
Because he tries once. He tries once and they deny him. And then finally, like, he lives this full life with his wife and then he dies. And they give it to him when he dies.
It was
because
like his
he
old lady's daughter that he ends up banging or whatever.
The
ends up
logic
marrying.
was this is how they determined it, and I'm ruining this movie for all of you. Was that because he couldn't die, he could not be living. And so what he did was he did this thing where it made it possible for him to go full on human, replace all his parts with human parts or synthetic human parts, and be able to die. And he dies. He dies. And so they grant it to him, which is like this ironic twist of, whatever. But it was interesting, like an interesting thought, right? Like, are we living? And that's that philosophical question for the ages. To be alive, you have to know death, right? Man.
The other
Right.
thing, yeah, no, I said yeah, not yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing that was brought up in the chat, and this was, oh no, let me finish what I was saying. So she removes herself from this thing because that was her prime directive didn't allow her to participate in this event. So like, even because the trolley incident is you do nothing and it runs over 5, but if you pull the lever, it only runs over the 1. So you have to act, and either way, you're culpable for what happens because you've not done anything. So technically, you killed 5 people. But she says, I can't even be a part of that because I'm not allowed to be. So you can't put me in that situation. There's like a logical fallacy is basically what it ends up being, where she's like, you can't put me in that situation because it violates my prime directives. So at that point, it's on you to do something. This is not my problem, it is your problem. And what I talked about the other day was I can separate the things in my life into 2 categories, my problems and not my problems. And I will, at any opportunity, mentally push something into the not my problem category. This is very much like the serenity prayer, God grant me the wisdom to recognize the things that I can change.
Talking about
the
the
things
Alcoholics Anonymous prayer.
Yeah. The things that I can change, the things that I can't change, and the wisdom to know the difference between the 2.
It was the opening of a movie I just saw. They did that. What movie was that? It's the
I don't know.
Yeah, I forget, but it was the Alcoholics Anonymous prayer.
It's called the Serenity Prayer.
The Serenity Prayer. That's what it is.
And the so that's the thing that I do is like, if I can put something in the not my problems category, I will, because if I can't change it, I'm not going to worry about it. If it's not something that I'm supposed to be messing with, kind of like time traveling, like you're not supposed to go back, you're not supposed to change things in the past. If it's not something I'm supposed to do, then I'm not going to do it. And if everybody just focused on the things that were their problems, because there's going to be some overlap, there's going to be some things that are your problems that are also somebody else's problems. So there's going to be some, you're going to drop some things and somebody else is going to pick them up, right? So if you just worried about your problems and the things that are legitimately your problems, there would be no problems because everyone would just be doing what there would be no worries. You wouldn't be worried about shit all the time.
Right.
So that's my take on it. And so I think you and I were discussing this because somebody, it was some relationship issue somebody had that they brought to my attention. They brought up to me and I said, honestly, that's just not my problem. So I'm not going, I put that into the not my problems category.
Yeah.
Now it's a weird thing because, there are times like, okay, so if you're going through some kind of trouble that is bothering you, that's not my problem, technically. But if you bring it to my attention and ask for my help, it becomes my problem. Now, when I use the word problem, I'm not saying necessarily it's a bad thing. It's just something that I have to deal with.
Yeah, a solved puzzle, if you will.
Right. So if you bring something to me, it has become my problem. And I will help you get through it, even though it's your problem. But it's been presented to me, so it becomes my problem, and I'm going to help you get through it. But if somebody brings me something and I deal with it to the best of my ability and they walk away from me saying, okay, that works, that's no longer my problem. And there's not much I can, for instance, okay, so it was a situation that was brought up. It was an individual on Twitter. She brought up some problem that she's having with her boyfriend. And her boyfriend, whatever, they're going through some relationship issues. And I realized at a certain point, like I did my chaplain-y duties, which is what I do. People will bring to me problems and I will help them through it. But the more I thought about it, I'm like, this is still a problem for her, but I have fulfilled my obligation and therefore it is no longer my problem. Right. That is their problem to deal with. I can only do so much. I can't make their relationship better. So that's not my problem. My problem was she came to me with, hey, I need help with this situation. Can you explain this to me? Can you kind of like help me wrap my head around this and maybe provide some kind of counseling? I've dealt with my problem. That's no longer my problem. Whatever chaos is going on in their relationship is not my problem to be worrying about. And if I sat up thinking about other people's problems, I would never sleep. I would never get, that's why most of you have fucking problems with depression and anxiety, is because you sit there and you worry about shit that really doesn't affect you and it's not your problem. So just drop it. Just let somebody else deal with it. Mentally, you have to remove that problem from your plate and realize that it's somebody else's problem so that you can focus on your problem. And that's where you get into trouble, because you start abdicating your duties, which are your problems, because you're worried about somebody else's problem. Stop it. Like, just get over it. Don't worry about that shit. Let somebody else worry about it, because they're going to anyways. But that was my whole point. And with her doing that, that was the same thing that I had. If somebody presented that situation to me, I don't have prime directives, right? I would look at it this way. I would say, logically, if you're just telling me 5 people are on the track versus 1 person on the track, that's all the information that I have. Logically, I have to flip the switch, because kill 1 person, save 5. That's a math problem. Like, there's no, like, that's 5 families that are not going to be affected versus 1 family that's going to be affected. Now, if you start presenting all this other information, my decision might change. Like you said, if the guy cured cancer or is going to cure cancer, that's a no-brainer. I'm going to let it run over the 5 people, especially if those 5 people are just like, again, the example that we talked about was the Elon Musk versus the George Floyds. If it's 5 George Floyds and 1 Elon Musk, I'm going to save the Elon Musk because he has a higher value. The societal value. And that's when people so like it becomes the objective subjective argument of subjectively. So objectively, people have no value. If you look at a person, logically, you're like, well, the planet is overpopulated. Thanos saw that. He said the universe was overpopulated. There weren't enough resources. We need to get rid of half the people or half the beings in the universe. Okay, that's a reasonable thing to assume. If you can remove yourself from that logically and retain an objective standpoint on it, that's fine. That's easy to do because it becomes a numbers game. But if everybody has subjective value, because to me, my family has value to, and I use the example of Jay Coop's friend who doesn't even know me or know of me or know of, certainly not of my family. They have no subjective value to him. So he could easily hear, oh, 5 people or 4 people died. Who cares? Those are just numbers. And then you see that when you watch the news or you read the news, you'll see the example I provided. It was like 50 people in a train crash in Taiwan. I said, if they wanted us to subjectively care about these people, they wouldn't have worded the headline to look like the beginning of a math problem where it says, if a train leaves the station going 100 miles an hour and crashes and 50 people die, that's essentially what these headlines saying, train in Taiwan crashes, leaves 50 dead. It's essentially a math problem is what it looks like. So subjectively, they have no value, but subjectively, they have a value to somebody. I don't know who, but objectively, who cares? It's 50 people in a planet of 7 billion. That inconsequential. It's a drop in a bucket. So that's kind of like my opinion on the matter. I would just look at it as a numbers game until somebody gives those people subjective value. And Sophia had the right idea. She's like, well, don't put me in that situation. You can't put me in that situation because it breaks my prime directive. I would just have to shut down. It's probably what would happen is she would just have to shut down, because if somebody said, hey, here's the situation, they lay out the situation, she'd shut down because it becomes a robot fallacy, a robotic fallacy.
Yeah. You know what I do? You know what I do in that situation?
You would back it up and then run over the other one.
No, I would keep hitting the switch. Like, I'd keep hitting the switch over and over and over until like it just like broke, and then the train would go off the tracks. That, or I would do the thing from Spider-Man. Remember when he's holding onto the train? He's like, I would do. No,
that's a bus
no,
that he does it too.
It was the train.
Oh, was it?
With the webs, remember? And he's almost off the rails. And
I thought it was. I'm thinking of the comic, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. So what else?
No, it's like that one. It's like that one issue of Batman when he lets Alfred drive the Batmobile.
Yeah, he lets Alfred drive. I like on haven't watched the Snyder cut yet, have
No, I
you?
haven't. I don't
Oh
have
man,
that kind of time in a day.
there's this great scene when Batman introduces Alfred to the Justice League, and he goes, "This is Alfred. He's my boss." It's so good. I love that joke because it reminds me of, remember on the Dark Knight when he's like, "I suppose you'll tell him that I helped you," and he goes,
I'm
he
gonna
goes,
tell
"I'm
him it
going to
was
tell
the
him it
whole.
was your idea." It was your idea. I love that joke because Alfred has like always had his back, but then kind of told him like, maybe this isn't a good idea too,
And then the first thing Muslim Bale does is rat him out, or like try to like turn on him and stab him in the
Yeah,
back.
yeah. I'm going to tell him it was your idea. So
So
what else
here's
do we got for the next 20 minutes?
the chat. So in the chat, I'm going to deal with the easy one first. Talking
All
about
right.
how abortion. Um, I wrote notes and I can't even read my own notes. It says abortion, how babies. Like I think I started writing something and then I got lost or I got distracted.
I was
Uh,
hoping we could do something funny. We weren't really
no,
funny this episode.
well,
We were
no,
all
we're
and angry.
we're getting information out, and I think we're being silly
Yeah,
in
not
that
everything
act.
can be funny, Roger.
Yeah.
Not everything. Yeah, sometimes.
I forgot. That's a Roger, man. He's like he's. I relate to Roger in a lot of ways, especially the gay stuff, right?
That's how
Um,
I feel about Bender right now. I just finished Futurama, and that's exactly how I feel about Bender. He's like an idol to me. I'm like, this robot right here is exactly how you should live life, dude. He just
yeah, he just
steals.
does his own thing.
Yeah.
The but no, how babies. Somebody had mentioned that you had mentioned about the stem cells. Now, yes, there is fetal tissue in the vaccine, and there was a pastor of a megachurch, right? And you should never believe anything a pastor from a megachurch says ever, because they're essentially false shepherds. They're in the ministry for money, and any minister who is in the ministry for money
Mega
is
church.
yeah, or I'm sorry, yeah, in the ministry in general. If you're out there like trying to be a minister to make money, there's something wrong with you because there's no money to be made in the ministry, in the legitimate ministry. And now when they do the mega churches, you'll see those guys are the ones who always fuck it up. Like they do it for themselves. Like the one guy who he's like, we need to care for the poor people, but he has like 3 jets. And then like you've got Joel Osteen who's talking about caring for the poor and the hurting, and he like locked the doors to the church for the hurricane victims. And then you've got like this guy, he was like, no, I understand, because somebody mentioned that there was fetal tissue in the vaccine, and he said, well, those babies were going to be aborted anyways. um, and so he said you should do it because they're kind of like Christ in that they were sacrificed so that others may live, right? And I've been having like my own little crisis with abortion. I don't support abortion, and there's no way you'll ever convince me that abortion is okay. And I think in many years to come, depending on the way history is written and who is in charge at the time, we will look back and either think, wow, those people were really barbaric to be sacrificing babies or to be killing babies like that, or they'll be thinking, I can't believe how backwards those savages were that they weren't willing to kill these fetuses, right? It just depends on how
Yeah.
history is
Yeah.
written and who's in charge.
Yeah.
So you'll never convince me that abortion is okay, but I have been struggling with is it okay to subject somebody who has Down syndrome? Down syndrome is not a great way to live. I can't imagine. Though I love Down syndrome babies, they are so cute. They're adorable. I have a friend who has a daughter who has Down syndrome, and she was just the cutest baby. And I thought, they're so happy, but you gotta wonder if that's like a meaningful existence for them. And so I've started to like have conflicting feelings about, is it okay to, another example, people who are born and they are born just like so retarded, like extremely retarded physically and mentally.
Like
Is
light
it
speed retarded, as they say. Light speed retarded.
Yeah, like just like stuck in a chair. They have to have somebody wipe their ass for 80 years. They just sit and drool all over themselves. They don't have meaningful conversation. There's no way to know how much they register of the
Yeah.
conversation. Like, is that fair to do that to them? And what happens when they die? Are the I assume, and based on the Apocalypse of Peter, which is one of the lost scriptures, those aborted babies are taken under the care of the caregiving or the caretaking angel, who raises them and teaches them and treats them well and all that. The the you see the chat?
I did.
But they go to this caretaker angel, right? And they so I wonder.
You hear my cough? You want me to do it again?
Yeah. But I wonder, is it fair to subject these babies to that life? And for that reason, do I have any sympathy for people who abort their babies knowing that they're going to be in that position? I don't know. I'm at that's the stage of crisis that I'm in, right? But would I get a vaccine? Do I support stem cell research that comes from aborted fetuses? No, because it encourages abortions, because then it allows people to use that as a out, or like an excuse to do it. They're like, well, I'm going to abort this baby for convenience, but I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it in such a way that I take on this like martyr, like, well, I aborted my baby and my baby went on to create the vaccine, right? Or my baby went on to become
like the lady at the academy is talking about how if she hadn't had her abortion, she wouldn't have gotten the Oscar or whatever it was.
Yeah, and like that sort of shit is unacceptable to me. I would never get stem cell stem cell treatment from baby stem cells, right? There are stem cells that you can get not from babies, right? There are other ways to get them, and for that, like, if people are doing that, I'm totally okay with that. I'm totally okay with stem cells in that regard. While they're still pulling from fetuses, I don't know how crazy I am about that, because stem cell extraction from fetuses is a terrible, horrible thing. And I think that's one of those things that I think even now we can look back on and we can look at and say that is fucking barbaric. Like partial birth abortions so that they can harvest stem cells. That is terrible. And if you look up partial birth abortions, you will be disgusted.
You know what I find funny about your argument is that it's a little contradictory to your previous humans don't have humans aren't
okay. No, I agree.
Because it's interesting, and like I'm contrast, like I think, like I've talked about this before, but I've dated a few girls that have had abortions, and like the earliest one, we were 20 years old, and I was like, look, I don't have a job, but I'll do whatever it takes, if you want to have this baby. But she was like Catholic, and like her parents were like super strict, and she was like, no, I'd rather have an abortion than have an unwedded child, right? Like that was her logic. And so she had this abortion. And so now my stance on it is like, well, it's not even my right to choose what happens with the child anyways. So does that mean that I can't have an opinion of it or whatever? And obviously not. Like I can still have an opinion, but like I have this gray area on abortion. And like I think like you do, like when we talked about the Sophia thing, and like humans, they don't have value until you explain who they are or what their value is. If they're just a number, then they're just a number. And so when I look at it like that, like logically, then that opens up all these questions like, well, there are a lot of things that the benefits, right? Like I start to put the pros of stem cell research, and like all these things, like being a man that's balding, like we could probably grow hair back, or like cure diseases and all these other things. And I go, why not? That's what I think, And then like I think about things like if I ever got cancer or AIDS, God forbid, or some disease, and they were like, here is a fucking baby fetus. If you eat the brain of this baby, you'll cure your disease. I would go, all right, pass the fucking barbecue sauce, right? Like I'll fucking do it. And that's like, and obviously don't go quoting me on that, but like I would do it, I think. And like it's crazy to think about that because there's so many facets. Like first of all, babies are like the veal of human.
That's terrible.
babies are like the veal of humans. So already I'm going, well, it's probably like at least tender, like it's probably good meat. Second of all, they have no fucking purpose in life. They're just babies, so they're not going to contribute to society, like looking at it like that. And then the other thing is like, who knows if life even has meaning? So what the fuck is the point, anyways? Like that's the scariest thing about old age, man. Like, and we were talking about this earlier too. Like, as a kid, you're just fucking full of piss and vinegar, and you don't know what the fuck, and you're just going, oh, I'm just living my life, and puberty or whatever. But then you become this adult, and you start learning shit, and you start having experiences, and you go, oh, I have this purpose, right? You find purpose, or so we think. Who knows? Who's we're on this what do you call it? Divine plan, which we can never know, or maybe you do know. Maybe God spoke to you. Who knows? But in the situation of like normal people, we go, what am I supposed to do? Right? The eternal existential question. What does my life mean? What is the meaning of it? Right? And then when you get to that point, when you've read like like fucking Thus Spake Zarathustra and fucking all these other like nihilistic writings and like Nietzsche or whatever, and you go, oh, I don't know, maybe life doesn't have any fucking meaning, and it's kind of stupid to sit here and try to go, it is so important, it's so great, and then you have all these other people in life, religious folk or spirituals, as you to generalize, and they're going, but it's the afterlife that's important, it's the afterlife, and this and that, so we got to live our lives this way, and so all these moral values that we have to like kind of, I don't know. I don't want to say inflict, but like impose on ourselves, right? Like all these moral values that we go, we need to think like this, and we need to have an understanding that human life is this and human life is that, and then it begs the question of like children, and like recently, like my values have like kind of been shaken about this because Sharon has a daughter, Jamie. She's 14 years old, and so with this relationship moving forward with Jamie, it puts me in the aspect of like, I will be a stepdad if I marry this woman, or when I marry this woman, I will be a stepdad, and in that aspect I have to start thinking like a father. And so I had all these thoughts and things that I'm sitting here like going, oh my god, like this child is important. And then I watched Bill and Ted, and the new one, right, Face the Music, and I was like, children are so fucking important. Children are so fucking important. Like, it made me realize, right? And I started thinking in the aspect of like, okay, not just being a father, but I have to have a successor and a fucking protege, someone that like I can say, you need to carry on my work, and I'm going to mentor you to do that, because who knows if I can live forever or not. So it's important for me to pass that knowledge on to you, and it's the only way to like achieve some sort of like legendary status, or have immortality, or whatever abstract nomenclature you want to fucking just slam on that. But it's still important, because that is what the future is children, right? They're the ones that are going to grow up and be. And then I think about Norm Macdonald's joke, and he says, well, we were those children. We were those children that we were supposed to think about at one time. And then it gets confusing, and you go, well, who is it really important for? At what point do we go, is it me? Should I just be selfish and think about me? Or should we go, well, everybody's important when, it's all this working together for community to achieve one goal. But when we're running around like douchebags, causing problems for each other and breaking out windows and burning down fucking businesses and like imposing all these laws on each other, we go, why does life need to be like this? Especially for those of us who are like borderline hedonists, where we go, hey man, just do what makes you feel good, as long as it doesn't fucking bother me. You know what I mean? And I don't know. It's a tough moral dilemma for me when it comes to like actual abortion, because I don't know. I don't know, man. I don't fucking know. And like, I don't know if I want to have kids one day, like actually like, pass on my genetics. But if this relationship works out with Sharon, then I will come into that position of being the father of the household, or the head of the household, and have to impart something to this girl, to Jamie, Sharon's daughter, and I'll have to do that in a way where I'm not a douchebag, not somebody that she goes on and goes, well, that guy that took care of me and my mom was a real asshole. That's the last thing I want. Of course, I always go back to like, we don't do things like selflessly. I don't believe that humans do things selflessly, and they can claim that like, I'm doing this because it's good for them and blah 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 blah. a lot of times, and my aunt is guilty of this because she's like the matriarchy of like my dad's side of the family, and she does all these great things, and everybody thinks she's a saint. But I know her because I lived with her, and she has this like she gets this satisfaction out of it that like she's in charge because she's done all these things for people, and then she holds it over people. She uses it to lord over like. Remember when I did that for you and I did all this for you? And then they're kind of in her debt, without having to be like I don't know, like persuaded because they just have to. Like, well, she helped me when I was down and out, so now I owe it to her. And so it's kind of like this reverse selflessness, you know what I mean? And so I think of that when
Yeah.
it comes to like being a parent, which I don't know, and like you'll have to like, give me your opinion on this as a father, because you have these kids and you're going, and I remember you telling me, you said, before I had kids and when I had a baby, I didn't think of it as that, like as father. It was just like, well, it's a baby and you got to take care of it. And it wasn't until a certain point that you were able to go, this is fucking huge. And like here I am going, well, I may be like a stepfather one day, and so now I have to think like this, and now I have to do this, and I'm understanding this like value and importance of our children, right, the future generation, and what I want to pass on to the future generation, because that's how you do it. It's either that or, my long-term goal of making movies and telling everybody how I feel through, cinema and visual media, so I'm interested to know what you think about that, like what your perspective is in that aspect.
So you just unloaded a lot on. I feel like that redheaded
I know,
chick from the press
I know.
pool. We got to
When I
circle
rant.
back. Um,
Yes,
no, so let me start out by saying this. You said you talked about my what the hell is it called when you hold two opinions? My double think, right? My yeah, we'll just
right.
call it double think because I hold two different opinions. Humans are objectively worthless. And at the same time, babies are ultra valuable just as a baby. Babies don't really contribute anything societally, right? They don't do anything for society as a baby. They don't do anything for society as a baby. But they drain on. They in fact hold a negative value to society because they pull a woman out of the workforce, assuming she works. They are a drain on like a family's income a great deal. They're very expensive. Babies are not cheap. Anyone who has kids will tell you that they're everything that you were spending money on. You've got like this is a business term, a DINK, dual income, no kids. When you've got
Right.
a family structure where it's just the man and the woman, or a man and a man or a woman and a woman. When you've got a two I know, I know. I have to say it though. Legally, I'm required to. Or an Apache helicopter and an asexual. But when you, whatever the nonsense genders are.
Yeah. What is the joke when a man loves a woman and a midget and a donkey?
behind a Walgreens in the dumpster
Yeah.
covered
And
in
there's
oil.
a slip and slide
Yeah. But
and two clients.
dual income, no kids. The amount of money you have as that couple it's insane. Like you look back. I look back at mine and my wife's life before we had kids. And it's just money wasn't an issue. Just we never thought about it because it just didn't matter.
Right.
We had it. We had money at all times to just do whatever the fuck we wanted. And then when we had kids, our focus shifted entirely to the children, and the money all went to the children. We went into a fair amount of debt just because of the kids. And we kind of goofed because we had two boys. We had our first two sons, and we were done. We were not going to have any more kids. And then one day, as wives will do, as mothers will do, they say, I know that we weren't going to have any more kids, but I kind of want to have another kid. And so we did. We decided we would have another kid if
Yeah.
we were so blessed as to become pregnant again. And we did immediately because I'm ultra potent and like,
Just super sperm.
yeah, I make boys and I make them on the first try. Like there was no trying to have kids. It was just we want to have kids. Okay, got
That's
it.
something to be proud of, dog.
And which is why
Just
I
fine.
joke.
on all cylinders, though.
I joke with people all the time. I was like, I can't masturbate like in a hotel because there will be like 2, 3 rooms down. Those women will all become pregnant. Uh,
That's a good
so
one.
they but yeah, we had gotten rid of all of our baby stuff with Dayton, who's been on the show before. You've met him before, and I know you've met him personally. But Dayton, we were done. We got rid of everything, and even the crib and all the baby clothes and all sorts of stuff. And then we decided to have another kid. So we ended up going into further debt because we had to buy all the shit again. And so you will go into a considerable amount of debt if you're not prepared for having kids.
Right.
And formula is not cheap. Diapers are not cheap. Wipes are not cheap. All the fucking toys and the clothes are not cheap. There's a lot of money to be made in actually like providing those services and those products. But I think having kids is the greatest thing. Being a dad is the greatest thing I've ever done. Having kids is the best decision I ever made. I love my kids. They drive me absolutely fucking crazy sometimes, but I love them to pieces. And there's nothing that I wouldn't do for them. Like when people talk about, you were talking about being selfless. There's nothing I wouldn't do for my kids. If it came down to either you die or one of them dies, I would gladly sacrifice myself, no matter how like
You know,
painful.
yeah, I'm not. I know, like I may have told you or said this to you before, but I was telling my dad one time about when I went to visit you when we weren't in DC that one time in that 1 month.
Right, yeah,
When
yeah, yeah.
last time I went to visit you was the first time I got to see you physically as a father. For 13 years, I knew you as Tom, the fucking Muldoon that went around town throwing water balloons with me. Like we were
Right.
just a couple kids, right? And when I saw that, like one of the things that like blew my mind, first of all, and also like changed me was first of all was like how happy Leslie was. She was so happy and so like way different than what I remember her, like way different, like happy and just like, and I thought, you know what? She's happy because Tom is giving her this wonderful life, and these kids, they're so like smart and like well behaved, and like it was such a crack up to me to see that because I how I know you, right? But then it gave me this perspective that it was like, well, Tom and I are so much alike that like if I were a father, I bet it would be the same. And for a long time I had this like stigma where I was like, man, like my dad ran out when I was a kid, and like I probably would be a shitty father, and I come from a long line of shitty fathers, and like, that's part of like the Hispanic genetic, right? And so I've always been concerned. And then like I saw you, and it was for lack of a better word, moving. I was moved. I thought, wow, this is crazy to see this scenario, just like surreal even, especially Leslie was the one that really surprised me though. I was like, wow, she's so happy, and like she's just donned that whole like soccer mom thing, and it was
Right.
impressive. I was really like, this is like, wow, this is what 8 years, or however many years, 13 years.
Whatever it was, I don't know. I'm bad at
Yeah,
math. I told you.
13 years. 13. I don't know, but you get what I'm getting at. And I'm not saying that to like puff up your ego or anything. I'm just saying
Too
like
late.
that that was something that like I noticed it was like shocking, and I'm not around kids that often, at all. And I was so surprised like how individually each one of your sons had like specific personality traits of you and your wife. And it was so like clear. Like I was so surprised with Dayton because he was so like, I don't know, borderline emo, like very like
Yeah.
distant, and like he had his like, Bieber haircut, and it was so funny to me that like you spawned that. But then it made sense. It made sense looking at like the hierarchy of your sons, like it made sense. Like, well, that's naturally what he would go into. And it's so funny. Like it cracked me up so much to see that and then see your personality in your sons. And it kind of made me long for that, like to think like, I wonder what it would be like to have my own, someone of my genetics that I would go, look at you. I taught you that, at the very least,
Yeah.
and I feel like there has to be some satisfaction in that. And you of all people would know. So, seeing that was just one of those things that I was like, what do you
The
know?
um that what I was driving at earlier was, and thank you for all those things, those kind things that you said. But even when they were born, and I think you even mentioned this briefly. Even when they were born, I didn't feel an emotional attachment to my kids right when they were born. It was almost like when, and I think we've discussed this before, it's almost like somebody just walks into your life. You don't immediately feel an attachment to that person.
Right. Yeah.
Mothers do sometimes, and sometimes they don't, and they call that postpartum depression, and that results in that too. I think there's a lot of psychological shit that comes with, like, oh, I don't feel any attachment to this child, and now that I don't have this life inside of me, I lost that piece of me, and there's a lot of postpartum stuff that comes from that.
Right.
But for a dad, all of a sudden somebody has been introduced to your life that you have to take care of. That is your responsibility, but you don't have what the mother had, like, growing inside of you for 9 months. You just
Right.
have somebody dropped on in your arms, like, hey, here you go, Dad. This is this new person that you have to develop an attachment to. And so it took a great deal of time for me to feel that, like, to actually love my children legitimately. And so I tell people that a lot, like, when a lot of, like, expectant fathers, when they ask me about it, I'm like, don't feel bad if you don't feel an emotional attachment right away to this child, because they're just a person. They're like a cute little person. And even before I was a father, before my first son was born, I didn't give a fuck about kids. I didn't. I straight up did not care about kids and babies, and people would show me their baby. Oh, isn't he cute? And I'm like, no, it's just a baby. They all look the same. But once I had my own children, I realized the value of children, like you were talking about a little bit ago. And somebody said in the chat, King Cracker actually said, babies are an investment in the future. And this is my dichotomy between humans are objectively worthless and babies are awesome, right? And babies are to be cherished and cared for. But because they're the most vulnerable, first of all, babies are awesome. I love babies now. Like, babies are the best. People can show me pictures of their babies now, and I'm like, oh my gosh, or somebody, like, hands me their baby, and I'm like, oh, I love babies, and, you know, like, just they're so cool. Like, and it's the miracle of life too, right? Because it's like all of a sudden you've got, like, you created this new human, and you know, you just get, it's very exciting to think about that, the miracle of life. And the babies are just, plus they have this potential, right? They have, so when we talk about the objective and subjective value of a human baby, or of a human, I think as a baby, they have this unlimited value that is immeasurable, because we don't know. They have this number of whatever their value is, and we don't know what it is. We know what George Floyd's value is.
That is a really good perspective. It's like they're like the infinity, or like something that doesn't have, you can't give value to yet, or they're so valuable that it's impossible to put value on them.
Right.
That's that's a beautiful sentiment, dude. Actually,
we know what the value was of George Floyd, right?
Yeah.
He was worthless. He ate a bunch of drugs before he got choked out by a cop. He was going to die anyways. And fuck him, because he held a gun to a pregnant mother's belly. And so that too, you can understand, like, now, I mean, I know you understood then, but, like, you can appreciate that if somebody threatens a baby or a pregnant mother, so a baby, because to me, a baby is, it's a human being from the moment of conception. Now, to the degree to which I am willing to look the other way, it becomes a numbers game. Like, if you do it before 12 weeks, I'm going to have a hard time, like, calling you a piece of shit, because at that point it's still really, really early, and the whole argument about whether or not, and again, the reason for your abortion too. So if it's just a matter of convenience, I'm going to call you a piece of shit if it's day one. Like, if you take the abortion pill, like, the day or the morning after pill. If it's just a matter of convenience, I'm going to call you a piece of shit. Because you knew that you didn't prepare, right? If you take the birth control pill, that prevents pregnancy. That prevents a baby from being, like, it prevents conception. So you're not killing a baby by taking the birth control pill.
Right.
But if you conceive a baby, or if you're not careful and you allow a life to potentially be conceived, and then you take the abortion pill the morning after so that like it flushes out, that could have been a life that you just killed. We don't know, but it could have been. And then I mean, especially if you're like late term abortions and in the second trimester and shit, I'll gladly call somebody a piece of shit if they abort a baby for convenience, especially at that point, because you knew, like, you had all this time to prepare for it. You had plenty of choices, and the whole argument about my body, my choice, being pro-choice, you had plenty of choices. You could have gotten on the pill. You could have worn a condom. You could have, like I said, I'm willing to look the other way to some degree for like somebody who gets like an abortion, doesn't tell me about it. Like, how am I gonna know? I'm not gonna call you a piece of shit if you do it behind my back. But people who go out and brag about it, I'm gonna call you a piece of shit. That sort of stuff. At that point, you're snuffing out a human life because you were lazy and you failed to prepare and you failed to plan. So that sort of stuff pisses me off. But yeah, human life, like as a baby, you are, you have like this unlimited potential, and the parents, that's why I blame parents all the time for the failed, for children who grow up to be bad people, because you as a parent have an obligation not only to that child but to society to raise your child in a way that they will provide meaning, or like some kind of meaningful contribution to society. And if you fail to do that, that's on you as much as it is the child. As if it's a child, I'm going to blame the parent before I'll blame the child. As an adult, if I look at your backstory and I find out that it was the parents, I'm still going to be a little disappointed in you, because you should know better. You've existed long enough to know what's right and wrong. And you've been exposed to society enough to know what's right and wrong. But at the same time, I'm going to judge your parents pretty harshly too, because they should have taught you. They should have scolded you. And if my kids, God forbid, ever grew up and did something that, like, you know, could be blamed on me, I would expect people to blame me, and that is why I am so stern with my children. But I am loving, but I am stern with them. And that's why, again, you mentioned them being well behaved. There's a reason why they're well behaved, because I exert that fatherly role on them, and I discipline them. And you know, I hit my kids, but I will discipline them, and I will correct them when they do something that they're not supposed to do. A lot of parents don't do that, or kids grow up in fatherless homes, and that results in some of the dregs of society that we have now. Yeah. Mothers are no better, who like take the children away from the father and don't let the father have any kind of impact. Then you have this nurture, this over nurture with no nature. The father is to provide the nature. Yeah. And if they don't get that balance, then they grow up to be George Floyd. And then they end up... I use him as an example because he was a piece of shit. And there's no denying there was nothing good about him. And objectively, he had a negative value. Subjectively, he had a negative value. But objectively, too. You could even look at George Floyd and just see what happened and be like, well, that dude... Well, no, I'll correct myself. Subjectively, based on what we know, given the circumstances and everything that went into it in his history, subjectively, he was a piece of shit. So, I don't know, man. But as a father, somebody who is entering the role of being a stepfather, that's one of the hardest jobs out there. It's harder than being a biological father. And it's why I'm so hard on fathers who are not involved in their children's lives, and who don't fight for that, because that is your responsibility. And you have this obligation to that. And you mentioned something earlier too about it's not your right to say, or like you don't get a say in whether or not she has an abortion. I think the males do. I think there's a reason why males have a say in abortion, because females have a say in whether or not the father has to take financial responsibility.
Right.
So if the mother can say he owes me child support, the father should be able to say, well, women should have to keep my baby. They shouldn't be able to whatever. If I can't have an impact over your uterus, you shouldn't have an impact over my wallet. And some fathers do want the child, and the mothers don't, and that's something that could totally be avoided if people were more adherent to some of these biblical values. Like, we talk about this every once in a while. They're just good values to live by, because if you didn't have sex until marriage, or even if you do, I can't sit here and pretend like, because I had sex before marriage, I'm not going to sit here and say that I didn't. But if you were to abide by that, no sex until marriage, you wouldn't have to worry about it. And at that point, that would be a decision that the mother and the father, or the husband and the wife, would make together. Like, hey, we are going to have a child, or hey, we should take steps to avoid having a child because we're not ready. It's a decision that's made where the woman is submissive and respects the husband, but the husband also respects the wife and treats the wife with and loves the wife and treats her with a great deal of respect. But that's just that's just how I deal with my marriage too. And even if I wasn't a religious guy, I think those are just good traits to have, because this is your partner that you chose to go through life with. You could pick anybody. You could be with somebody for a while and say, you know what, looking forward into the future, I see myself going this direction, and I don't see you with me. I don't see you as a partner who would benefit me in the future. A wife is an investment too. Somebody said children are investments. This King Cracker said babies are investments in the future. A wife is an investment. You're not going to invest in something that you see as being a failure, right? If you're investing in a business, you're not going to invest in a business that makes diapers with a hole in the back, because that's a stupid business idea. Likewise, you wouldn't marry a woman who, I don't know, if you want to have kids, you wouldn't marry a woman who's barren. You wouldn't marry a woman who doesn't have the same values, or who doesn't believe in you, or treat you like shit. That's an investment. That's a bad investment if you were to marry that woman. So you would want to marry a woman who is a good investment. So it's the same kind of concept. And anyways, I chose my wife. She chose me. So I chose my wife. I expect her to be a good partner in life. She chose me. It is my obligation to uphold the sort of person that she invested in, right? I don't want to be a shitty investment. So I treat my wife in a way that makes her realize and recognize and appreciate that I am a good investment. But that's my opinion on it.
That's a good way to look at it.
So you want to shill, V? Since we talked about pyramids?
I guess we should, since we didn't do our actual episode that we were supposed to do. I feel kind of bad for that, because this is the second time. This is the second time that we can't get through it. But you're right. We had some things we had to talk about today, and there were some things that I was on fire about this week that just came up. And like when you told me before that we were doing the show, I was like, well, I have some gripes that I know I'm going to bring up. And I even told Sharon when I was telling her about the whole thing about, when I was like, well, we probably shouldn't plan a trip this year. And I was like, I'll probably rant about this on the show. I'll probably complain about it. And then I ended up doing that because it is kind of frustrating. As far as shilling goes, don't forget to follow us on all the social medias that we have, Twitter and whatnot. Send us messages. We'll reply back. We'll send you messages, tag us in whatever you think is funny. We like funny memes, so feel free to do that. We have our Discord. I'm really enjoying the Discord because it's a really fun chance to get in there and chat with the buds, that come to the show and also hang out with us and stuff. And you guys can ask us anything. We'll get in there and have some fun. And there's always some good discussions going on too, or just some memes. There's a specific chat room that's just dedicated to memes, so you can go in there and just dump all your memes on us, and we'll all like and share them. I'm still doing our contest. If you get us to the 700 subscriber, which we're almost at the devil number here, 666. Once we hit 700, if you take a screenshot of that and DM it to me on Twitter, I will send you a shower curtain of your choice from our "You Had Me at Bigfoot" merchandise. So don't forget, we're still doing that. What else? Buy our merch. If you got a hankering for a Bigfoot shirt, there's some great ones out there. My favorite is the Jake Hoob shirt. I actually bought one and I wear it all the time. I love it. And then you can even see in some of our memes that we pass around, our favorite Alex Jones is even wearing it. So that's a blast. What else? Do I got anything else, or does that cover it, you think?
You tell me. You tell me, dipshit.
I don't. Yeah, needle dick. Yeah, I don't know. That's all I got. I guess that's it. I'm excited because I'll give them a little taste of what we're working on. I'll throw this at you guys. Tom and I have decided to move forward with our project, our animation project, and I threw out a feeler for animators, and I couldn't get jack shit, even with all my connections on LinkedIn. Of course, a lot of people aren't working right now because of the pandemic, so there's not a lot of people on LinkedIn like looking and checking the feeds as they are other ones. And so I couldn't get an artist. Well, I got a couple of bites. I got a couple of artists that were like, I'm interested, and they sent me their resumes and their portfolios, and they have like no experience whatsoever. And I was like, I am not going through that again. And so today or the other day, I was like, you know what, dude? I need to put my passion project aside and just start working on something that's fun and like jam with Tom, and Tom can handle this stuff. And so I threw it at Tom, and we decided we're going to move forward with our Civilians project, the show that's about Tom and I, and we're going to see if we can pitch it. So we're going to create an animatic. So actually tonight after the show, we're going to do our little writers meeting and go over episode 1, which I have half scripted, have not completed. But the half script is, which is funny because we have other episodes fully scripted, but the pilot, the actual first episode, is not scripted to like it's not finished. I think it's like 10 pages maybe, so I still need another 12 pages to finish it out. So we're gonna go over that tonight and talk about some stuff that we can do for that. So hopefully, who knows what's on the horizon for that project, but I'm really excited about it because it's something that we can do, just him and I, just Tom and I. So that we can just do like I looked at it, I was like, look, dude, we can do the art. We'll just do an animatic, something crude, and then we'll do the voices ourselves, and it'll be good. People think we're funny, so that has to translate to this, so we should be good. And so I pitched it to Tom, and he's on board. So we're gonna move forward with that and see where it goes. Who knows? We could end up doing a Kickstarter to get it promoted. And if we end up doing that, of course, we'd like you guys' support. If we don't do that, and it just so happens that I can reach out to these talent acquisition guys and get us like a good pitch meeting, which I have some connections that I can probably touch base with to find out for sure. But as of right now, the word is we are moving forward with a cartoon, because that is how I need to get into this industry, is to start making cartoons. And so I'm excited about it. I know I'm kind of just rambling about that, but I'm excited. I really am excited, dude. Once I started really thinking about this today, I was like, this is going to be fun. This is going to be fun for us. What do you think?
I think it's bullshit. I think it fucking sucks. No, I agree. We had been doing this for, gosh, a couple of years ago we were working on this and kind of put it off. I love how in the chat, I'm being called out by.
I know. I haven't really looked at it.
King Cracker. So first of all, I'm gonna call you guys out. King Cracker says that, can we get the Discord link or not? Which I had seen earlier. Somebody had asked for it, and I meant to give it to you, but I was just gonna put it in the description. It's been in the description of the last few episodes as I did the descriptions and shit. And then Buzz Busby, who, by the way, welcome to the chat. And somebody else joined. Oh, Stoneclaw was in the chat earlier, which was friggin' awesome. Always good to have Stoneclaw in the chat. I don't think he's here anymore, but I want to mention his name. He's a very funny guy. He was on the show before. But Buzz Busby said Tom has disdain for the chat, as if I hadn't specifically made it a point to go through the chat when you guys and say, hey, we need to talk about what's going on in the chat, you motherfuckers. Uh, but no, it is now. I have shared the Discord link in the chat, so if you click on that and join the Discord, we'd love to have you. It's basically just me, V, J Coop, and Jurassic Weeb in the chat. And then gosh, I always forget his fucking name.
Wendigo
Yeah,
Gang is
Wendigo Gang, and then Jerry. There's a Jerry in the chat as well who we've been discuss. We do a lot of very interesting discussions in there, and then I share a lot of like the nonsense that I do. Like today, I went and bought a bunch of dirt and shit so I could redo the yard. And yeah, we do a lot of that. We do. There's a lot of like casual chat there, man.
To me, Discord is so much fun because we can just post anything in there. There's no like. There's no way that we can get banned, so we can say whatever we want, do whatever we want, and throw in whatever we want. So,
except for I Love God learned the hard way, like the limitations on what can and cannot be said. Like,
at what point will we get upset?
We limit the hateful speech. But I did want to address this too while we're on the topic of people like thinking that I ignored the chat. There was something that I had written down that I wanted to address. The discussion about circumcision. You guys talking about circumcision. I'm going to let you in on a little secret. As a seminary student who is currently working his way through the Pauline epistles and forced to become a Pauline scholar because of all the exegesis that I've had to do on Paul's letters, there is one, if I could summarize Paul's opinion of the circumcision, if I could summarize what Paul said, and what Paul said in the New Testament is kind of like what it is. Like, that's the rule, because Christ called upon Paul to go and spread the gospel and to clarify to the various churches throughout the land what they were supposed to be doing and correct the wrongs that were being done at the time. First of all, I Love God did mention Leviticus, and there's something important that you need to know about the Mosaic law of Genesis, of the Torah, of the first 5 books of the Bible, of the Old Testament. All the Mosaic laws went away as far as rites and rituals and ceremonial law and all that stuff. The things that you need to pay attention to from the Old Testament are the moral laws. So essentially the 10 Commandments, and that's it. Then in the New Testament, Paul makes it very clear that he pulls no punches in this when it comes to circumcision, because there is still some discussion on whether or not you are to be circumcised as a Christian. Paul makes it very clear that you do not have to be circumcised, and anyone tells you that you have to be circumcised is what Paul referred to as mutilator of the flesh. He called them dogs and evildoers and mutilators of the flesh. That's how he referred to the Jews in the New Testament, the Pauline epistles. So, when somebody tells you that you have to be circumcised in order to be a Christian, that is untrue. And Paul makes it very clear in all of the letters. So Philippians, Ephesians, Colossians, Galatians, 1 Corinthians, 2 Corinthians, Romans, and a couple others. But if you look into those, in every single one, he has to address the fact that the Jews were telling the new converts, the Gentile converts, that they had to be circumcised. And he said that is not true. Now, if you want to, you can be circumcised. And the argument, which comes from denominational preference, which we talked about earlier, the denominational changes that were made by biblical scholars, they said that the reason for circumcision still in the Christian community was because it was a sacrifice. It was a way to ceremonially share in the sacrifice of Christ. So when you are circumcised, you are giving up a portion of yourself as a sacrifice in the same way that, not in the same way, but so that you can relate to Christ, to be more like Christ in your sacrifice. But to be a Christian who is uncircumcised, totally okay. To be a Christian who is circumcised, totally okay. That is the rule. And Paul, if I were to summarize Paul's opinion on the topic of circumcision and people arguing about circumcisions, and this is not an attack on anyone in the chat, so if anyone ever tells you that, Paul's opinion on circumcision, yeah, I'm sorry, I Love God, I wasn't able to like fully read the whole thing because we were like doing the show as we did it, but for anybody who tells you that you have to be circumcised or that you should be circumcised as a Christian, Paul's opinion on the topic was, shut the fuck up. That was it. Like, if you could summarize what Paul said about circumcision, it was shut the fuck up. Because he was so tired of hearing about it and people trying to tell people that they had to, that he just, at a certain point, he said, shut the fuck up. Period. That is the, it's not biblical. That is my interpretation of what Paul said, and you could read it yourself. He talks about circumcision at great length throughout all of his epistles. So don't let anyone ever tell you that you need to be, or that you should, for that matter. His argument was, just stop talking about it, because it's not important. And anyone who tells you that you have to is wrong. So shilling wise, yeah, like what V said, just if you get out there and join the Discord, we'd love to have you. We'd love to chat. We do chats throughout the week, and a lot of times people will come in and they'll pitch ideas. They'll talk to us about stuff that we should talk about. We do a lot of current event shit, so stuff that doesn't make the show that we just want to kind of talk about, like, I don't know, like Alex Jones today stopped human traffickers. And then also the talk about spirit cooking was validated in Newsweek. Like, that sort of shit is what we talk about. The stuff that comes up as it happens, we talk about it. There's a thing for tentacle porn where Jurassic Weeb is kind of like, he's like makes the most contributions in that. We do a lot of shit about like those fake sex positions and stuff like that in the Wendigo nudes, and then the haunted memes is where we share all our memes. So if we ever come across any memes that we want to share, we just post them there. The grabassery chat is just where we kind of chat and shoot the breeze. But yeah, we'd love to have you there. We do a lot of discussion there, and you're more than welcome to reach out to us there if you don't have, for instance, Twitter. We share some of the Twitter links that are applicable. And follow us on Twitter, the Instagram. I'm still kind of like sitting that one out, seeing if I'm kind of waiting out this doxing storm before I put it back on. But we'll have that up and operational again at some point. Other than that, yeah, the Redbubble's still there. Look forward to doing this civilian stuff with V, and look forward. You should anticipate some of that coming out, in the future. But thanks everyone for tuning in, and we will see you next week for the actual continuation of the M Files.
I'm Joe Biden, and I approve this message.